Imagine yourself sitting in your familiar room, the soft yellow glow of the night lamp spilling across quiet streets outside. Just before closing your eyes, there are moments that feel strangely vivid, an uneasy tension before a journey begins, or the sudden urge to call a loved one without knowing why. Sometimes these fleeting sensations align uncannily with events that unfold later. We often call it intuition or a gut feeling, yet could it be something more, a part of consciousness brushing against fragments of time that have not yet arrived? For decades, scientists from neuroscience to quantum physics have tried to make sense of such mysteries. They speak of dreams that seem to foreshadow real events, of the body responding seconds before an unexpected image flashes on a screen, and of experiments hinting that the future might somehow ripple backward into the present. But there are also voices of caution, suggesting these moments are nothing more than chance, memory, or selective attention. Between these perspectives lies a question that grows ever more compelling. Can human consciousness step beyond the linear flow of time? If so, then the reality we inhabit may be far vaster than our everyday senses reveal. Tonight, we gently enter that exploration. This is Arcane Skies. If these ideas spark your imagination, consider leaving a like and subscribing to join us on this journey, and let us know in the comments where and when you are listening right now. There is a certain quietness that surrounds stories of knowing the future before it arrives. They are rarely told with a shout, and almost never in the language of proof. Instead, they slip into conversation late at night, or in the margins of journals, or as a whispered confession. I just knew. A mother who bolts upright seconds before her child cries out in another room. A traveller who cancels a flight for no apparent reason, only to hear later that the plane was grounded by disaster. A child who hugs her father goodbye at the airport and feels with chilling clarity that it will be the last time. These are the stories that science has often set aside, because they are difficult to pin down, and yet they return again and again across generations, cultures, and continents. To ignore them would be to ignore one of the most haunting elements of human experience. Imagine yourself standing in an old library, shelves rising higher than your reach, the air smelling of dust and time. Somewhere between the worn covers of philosophy, religion, and science, you would find references to these moments. Different names in different ages, but the same underlying puzzle. The ancient Greeks spoke of oracles who could peer into tomorrow. In medieval Europe, mystics wrote of visions that came unbidden, flickering like lanterns in the mind. In the villages of the Andes, shamans still describe dreams that warn of storms or sickness before they arrive. In modern hospitals, doctors quietly recount cases where patients spoke of death with startling accuracy the night before it came. The question persists. Is this merely coincidence wrapped in poetic storytelling, or does it hint at something fundamental about the way consciousness connects to reality? Scientists who dared to ask have not always been welcomed. Yet some did so anyway, armed not with crystal balls, but with controlled experiments. In the 1990s, Dean Radin designed a study so elegantly simple that it almost felt like a trick of stage magic. Volunteers sat before a computer while electrodes tracked their brainwaves. They pressed a button, and after a 5-second pause, the computer displayed a random image. Sometimes it was peaceful, like a beach at dawn. Other times it was violent or disturbing. What Radin noticed was subtle but consistent. The brain seemed to react before the image appeared. Electrical spikes rose in anticipation of horror, calm rhythms held steady for serene pictures, even though the computer had not yet made its random choice. For skeptics, this felt impossible, like the effect was running backwards. For those willing to listen, it suggested that consciousness might not be bound so tightly to the present moment. Other researchers picked up the thread. Julia Mossbridge, a cognitive neuroscientist, began keeping track of her own peculiar dreams that described events not yet lived. She found that many of them came true, not vaguely, but with detail sharp enough to surprise her colleagues. Instead of brushing it off, she turned her curiosity into systematic study. She gathered thousands of accounts from ordinary people who had experienced the same, sudden insights, inexplicable dread, or visions during sleep that seemed to map the road ahead. When tested in the lab, a small but persistent pattern emerged. Skin conductance, heart rate, even the dilation of the pupils often shifted moments before a future stimulus arrived. The body, it seemed, sometimes knew what was coming. Critics argued that chance and selective memory could explain much of this. After all, humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We remember the dream that matches the accident, but forget the dozens that did not. Yet the sheer consistency of the results across repeated experiments raised uncomfortable questions. If chance alone were the culprit, why did the numbers so stubbornly resist dismissal? And why did certain conditions, strong emotions, meaningful stakes, make the effects more pronounced? To picture it differently, think of a pond at twilight. Drop a stone into the water and ripples spread outward. From the shore you can watch them moving away, each circle wider than the last. But what if, in ways we do not yet understand, some ripples moved not just outward but backward, as if time itself allowed echoes to travel in reverse? Consciousness might be like the surface of that pond, sensitive enough to register disturbances that technically haven't happened yet, but are already written into the fabric of possibility. The idea may sound strange, but quantum physics has long been stranger. In the laboratory, particles can become entangled. Two photons, for instance, acting as if they remain connected no matter the distance. Change the state of one, and the other responds instantly, even if separated by light years. Stranger still, some experiments suggest this link can stretch across time itself. A measurement made in the present can appear to influence the past behavior of a particle. Physicists call these setups delayed choice, or quantum eraser experiments, and they rattle our intuition about cause and effect. If matter at its smallest scale does not obey a strict order of past then present then future, why assume that mind, the most complex phenomenon we know, must do so? Sitting with these questions is like standing on the threshold of a cave with a flickering torch. You can only see a few feet ahead, the darkness stretches further, and you cannot be certain whether treasures or illusions lie within. Yet something pulls you to step forward. The very possibility that consciousness could stretch beyond the ticking of clocks touches deep currents of human imagination. It raises hopes that warnings from the future could save lives, that inspiration could arrive like gifts from timelines not yet born. It also raises fears, that free will might be an illusion, that destinies are fixed and glimpsed only in fragments. Between these poles, the human mind hovers, uncertain but endlessly fascinated. The skeptics are not wrong to be cautious. Extraordinary claims deserve extraordinary evidence, and the road from suggestive experiments to solid theory is long. But perhaps the value lies not only in proof, but in the willingness to explore. Many of the greatest scientific revolutions began with questions that seemed absurd. The idea that invisible waves could carry voices across oceans, that unseen microbes could cause disease, or that solid matter is mostly empty space, all were once ridiculed. Time has a way of transforming heresies into common sense. Could precognition, presentiment, and the feeling of déjà vu one day join that list? For now, we linger in the mystery. Imagine again the mother who rushes to check on her child moments before an accident. Picture the artist who wakes from a dream with a melody that becomes a masterpiece. Recall the ordinary moments when you yourself felt compelled to turn left instead of right, to delay instead of hurry, to call instead of remain silent, and later wondered why. Each could be explained as coincidence. Each could also be seen as a subtle brush with the future. The difference may depend less on the events themselves and more on the story we choose to tell about them. As the night deepens, we carry this story forward not as a claim but as an invitation to wonder, to imagine that consciousness may be more than a passenger in the present. Perhaps it is also a traveller across the strange landscape of time, leaving faint footprints in tomorrow and bringing back whispers of what lies ahead. What would it mean if those whispers are real? What would it change about the way we live, love, and make decisions? These are the questions that guide us gently into the next chapter of our exploration. The first time many people hear about experiments on precognition, they imagine something dramatic, perhaps a person predicting lottery numbers or a clairvoyant foretelling world events. The reality in laboratories is much quieter. It often looks like a dim room with a volunteer seated in front of a computer, sensors attached to measure heart rate, sweat on the skin, or subtle changes in brain waves. There is no crystal ball, no chanting, only silence, and a machine waiting to flash an image. And yet, in that silence, strange things begin to happen. The volunteer does not know what is coming. The computer itself has not yet decided. The image will be chosen randomly, milliseconds before it appears, but the body reacts anyway. Sometimes the heart quickens, sometimes the pupils widen, sometimes the electrical activity in the brain shows a pattern that anticipates shock. It is as if the body is already bracing for what has not yet arrived. This phenomenon has been given a modest name, presentiment, meaning a feeling that precedes. Between the late 1970s and early 2000s, dozens of studies tested it in different ways. The combined results showed a small but consistent effect, too regular to dismiss as chance. The odds against randomness alone explaining the findings were calculated at millions to one. Of course, as statistics are not the same as certainty, scientists are trained to be skeptical, and many remain cautious. But when the data keep repeating across different labs and different methods, even the cautious begin to wonder. One of the most famous of these researchers, Dean Radin, once explained the design of his studies with the elegance of a magician, showing an audience both hands to prove nothing is hidden. Volunteers pressed a button, waited 5 seconds, and then saw an image. The crucial point was that during those 5 seconds, the computer had not yet selected what the image would be. Only after the waiting period did the machine make its random choice. And still, somehow, the body reacted in advance, calm for serene pictures, agitated for disturbing ones. For those who believe in the strict arrow of time, this was nonsense. How can the body react to something that technically does not yet exist? But for those willing to think differently, it opened a door into possibilities that sound like science fiction, but are written in the language of measurable physiology. If you step away from the sterile setting of a lab, you find that such stories have always existed in daily life. Consider dreams. Across cultures and centuries, people have described dreaming of events that later came true. A Roman statesman might dream of a battle lost. A farmer might dream of a storm destroying crops. A parent might dream of an accident involving their child. We often dismiss these tales as coincidence or exaggeration, but modern researchers like Julia Mossbridge decided to treat them as data. She kept journals of her own dreams, noting details before they could be coloured by hindsight. When life unfolded, she compared what happened with what she had written. More often than chance would suggest, the matches were close and undeniable. Encouraged, she asked others to do the same, gathering a collection of dream accounts that hinted at a subtle connection between sleeping consciousness and future events. There is something poetic about this possibility. Sleep frees the mind from its daily logic. The walls of time and reason loosen, and images drift in strange combinations. Perhaps, in this loosened state, consciousness can slip through cracks that waking life seals tight. The dream becomes not just a replay of yesterday, but a preview of tomorrow, delivered in symbols and metaphors that only later make sense. Think of the countless stories where someone wakes from a troubling dream and alters their plans, only to discover they narrowly avoided misfortune. Even if 99 dreams are meaningless, the one that proves true carries a weight that cannot be ignored. But let's pause here. For every story of a prophetic dream, there are hundreds of ordinary ones full of nonsense and confusion. For every experiment suggesting the body anticipates the future, there are critics pointing to flaws in design or interpretation. Skeptics argue that humans are masters of remembering the hits and forgetting the misses, of weaving patterns into randomness. And they are right to warn us. Without care, the human imagination can build castles of certainty on foundations of coincidence. The challenge, then, is to walk the line between open curiosity and disciplined caution, to listen without surrendering judgment, to question without closing the door. If we widen our lens beyond science and personal stories, we find traditions that have long treated precognition as normal. In the mountains of Tibet, oracles are consulted before major decisions. Their visions, sometimes delivered in trance states, are considered guidance from beyond the present moment. In the Amazon, shamans drink bitter brews that alter perception, claiming they reveal events yet to unfold. Among Indigenous Australians, the dream time is understood as a dimension where past, present and future coexist, and where skilled individuals can journey to glimpse what lies ahead. These accounts, separated by geography and culture, echo the same theme, that consciousness may not be confined to the now. Modern thinkers sometimes cringe at these comparisons, worried that science and tradition should not mix. But perhaps it is better to see them as parallel attempts to explore the same mystery, using different tools. Where shamans use ritual and altered states, scientists use electrodes and statistical analysis. Both are asking, in their own way, what is the true nature of time, and how does consciousness move within it? Here is where quantum physics enters the story, not as an explanation, but as an analogy that bends the imagination. In the quantum world, particles can exist in multiple states at once, a phenomenon called superposition. They can be linked across distance in entanglement, changing together instantly even if separated by galaxies. In delayed choice experiments, the decision of how to measure a particle can influence how that particle behaved in the past. If matter at its most basic level can behave outside the tidy order of cause and effect, perhaps it is not so absurd to wonder if mind, emerging from matter yet not reducible to it, might also touch both directions of time. Picture standing on a beach at low tide. The waves wash in, then retreat, each leaving patterns in the sand. We're used to thinking of time like those waves, always moving forward, never turning back. But what if the ocean itself allows ripples to move in both directions, some surging forward, others retreating from the future into the present? Consciousness might be the sand, sensitive enough to register both. Sometimes the imprint is faint, dismissed as nothing. Sometimes it is deep, leaving us with a strange conviction that we already know what is yet to come. Of course, these are metaphors, not proofs. But metaphors matter. They shape how we approach the unknown. If we see precognition only as superstition, we will never design the studies that might reveal more. If we see it only as established fact, we risk fooling ourselves. Between these extremes lies the path of exploration, the slow accumulation of evidence, the willingness to say, maybe. As you drift into the quiet rhythm of this story tonight, consider the moments in your own life that defy neat explanation. A sudden unease that made you pause before stepping off a curb, a call you placed just in time, a dream that seemed trivial until reality caught up with it. Science may not yet explain these fully, perhaps it never will. But in the soft space between skepticism and belief, the human mind finds wonder. And wonder, in its own way, is a kind of truth. When people first hear about the idea that the mind might sense the future, they often ask the same question: how could that possibly work? The question itself is fair, because our entire understanding of daily life is built on the feeling that time runs in one direction, from what has happened into what is happening, and only then into what will happen. We wake up, we drink our coffee, we walk through the hours of the day, and only later do we look back and see a chain of causes leading to effects. Yet when researchers began to probe more deeply, they found cracks in this neat picture. They discovered that on the smallest scales, in the hidden world of quantum mechanics, time does not behave as simply as our clocks suggest. Quantum mechanics is the branch of physics that deals with the tiniest building blocks of reality, particles smaller than atoms, dancing in ways that seem to ignore common sense. In this domain, a particle can exist in multiple states at once, what physicists call superposition. It can be here and there, spin up and spin down all at the same time, until someone measures it and forces it to choose. Even stranger, two particles that were once close can become entangled, meaning they remain linked no matter how far apart they drift. Change one, and the other reacts instantly, as if distance does not exist. Albert Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, and though he disliked it, experiment after experiment confirmed it. Now imagine what it means when scientists test entanglement not only across space but across time. In certain experiments, the choice of how to measure a particle in the present seems to affect how that particle behaved in the past. These are called delayed choice or quantum eraser experiments, and their results suggest that the boundary between past and future is not as rigid as we assume. It is as though the universe holds many possibilities open until a decision collapses them, and that collapse can ripple backward as well as forward. If matter can behave this way, could mind, which arises from matter, also participate in this strange flexibility of time? Some researchers have begun to ask whether consciousness itself might be a kind of quantum system. The brain, after all, is not simply an electrical machine of neurons firing like wires in a circuit. It is a warm, wet, complex web of biological structures, some of which might be capable of supporting quantum effects. Tiny cylindrical structures inside neurons called microtubules, for example, have been proposed as candidates for hosting quantum processes. Though controversial, the idea is being taken seriously by more scientists as evidence accumulates that quantum effects can survive inside living systems. Plants use quantum tricks to move energy during photosynthesis with extraordinary efficiency. Birds appear to navigate long migrations by sensing the Earth's magnetic field using quantum entanglement inside proteins in their eyes. If nature has already learned to harness quantum strangeness in these ways, why not also in the brain? And if the brain does exploit quantum properties, then perhaps consciousness is not confined to the strict order of seconds and minutes, but can reach sideways or backward through time, catching glimpses of what is yet to unfold. To understand how radical this is, think of your own memories. They feel like a storehouse of the past, moments recorded and replayed. But what if some of the fragments that pass through your mind are not memories at all, but precognitions, snapshots of the future sliding into awareness the same way recollections do? Julia Mossbridge has described this sensation as remembering the future. She does not mean it in a mystical way, but in a literal sense. The same mental feeling that arises when you recall a past event sometimes arises before a future one, as if both belong to the same library of consciousness. In one story she often tells, a girl hugs her father goodbye at the airport and feels a certainty she cannot explain that she will never see him again. Hours later, his plane crashes. To skeptics, this is coincidence sharpened by tragedy. To others, it is evidence that consciousness can step outside of time, if only for a moment, to bring back knowledge that has not yet been lived. The challenge is not whether such moments happen, countless people claim that they do, but how they happen. That is where quantum mechanics offers a possible path, not yet a map, but a set of signposts pointing toward a deeper reality. Dean Radin, whose experiments measured brain responses before images appeared, suggests that consciousness might be entangled with its own future states. Picture yourself tomorrow, drinking tea, reading these words again. If your present mind and your future mind are quantum connected, then perhaps information can travel between them. It might not come in clear sentences or visions, but in subtle signals, an uneasy feeling, a sudden urge, a dream image that only later reveals its meaning. Of course, this raises uncomfortable questions. If the future can influence the present, does that mean the future is already fixed? Do we have free will, or are we simply replaying events already written in some cosmic script? The answer may be less rigid than either extreme. Quantum mechanics suggests that the future is not a single certainty, but a cloud of probabilities. Consciousness, entangled with itself across time, might sample from that cloud, sensing the most likely paths. In this view, precognition is not about destiny, but about possibility, a way of feeling the weight of one outcome over another before it arrives. Think of it like walking through a forest at dusk. The path forks ahead, but from where you stand you can see only shadows. Then a breeze carries the smell of smoke from one direction, while another path feels cool and safe. You have not yet chosen, but your senses are already hinting at what lies beyond. Precognition may work in a similar way. Not a map of the exact future, but a nudge toward or away from what is likely to happen. Critics still argue that such metaphors cannot replace hard evidence, and they are right. But evidence continues to build slowly, across dozens of studies replicated in different labs. Brain activity, skin response, heart rate, pupil dilation, all show anticipatory changes seconds before events occur. When combined, the statistical odds of chance explanation drop to near impossibility. And yet, because the implications challenge our most basic assumptions about time, many remain hesitant to accept them. But perhaps acceptance is not the point. Perhaps the point is to remain with the question, to allow it to deepen rather than rush to closure. For in that space of wonder, new possibilities emerge. If consciousness can touch the future, then intuition, creativity, even inspiration itself might be rooted in this same phenomenon. The composer who hears a melody complete in his mind, the inventor who envisions a machine before building it, the writer who dreams of a story fully formed. Perhaps these are not miracles, but moments when the mind listens to echoes of futures waiting to be born. As night stretches on, consider that possibility as gently as you would a candle flame in the dark. Do not clutch it, do not declare it true or false. Simply notice how it flickers, how it illuminates both fear and hope. For if consciousness is indeed more than a prisoner of the present, if it can wander through the strange corridors of time, then who we are is far more mysterious than we ever imagined. When we think of intuition, we often imagine a fleeting feeling that defies explanation. A sudden chill in the chest, a whisper in the back of the mind, an urge to pause or move forward without reason. Most of the time, we brush these moments aside as quirks of psychology, nothing more than the brain processing subtle cues too quickly for us to notice. And yet, when people look back, they often realize that these moments of knowing were not trivial at all. They pointed toward outcomes that had not yet occurred, warning of accidents or hinting at opportunities that later became clear. If we step back from individual stories and begin to view them as part of a wider tapestry, the picture that emerges is one in which human beings are constantly brushing against the edges of the future, often without realizing it. Consider how often the word instinct appears in our everyday language. We say a leader has good instincts, or that someone followed their gut, or that a choice was made by feel rather than analysis. Instinct, in the evolutionary sense, refers to patterns of behavior shaped over millennia, automatic responses to threats and opportunities. But what if part of what we call instinct is something more subtle, something that allows living beings to sense possibilities before they unfold? Imagine early humans on the savannah facing predators in tall grass. Those who felt an unexplainable urge to move away at just the right moment may have survived more often than those who ignored such signals. Over countless generations, such sensitivity would become embedded in the very fabric of survival. Perhaps this is why so many cultures throughout history have taken intuition seriously, treating it not as superstition, but as a practical tool for navigating the unknown. The modern world, with its clocks and data and constant noise, has little patience for whispers from the subconscious. We prefer spreadsheets, measurements, probabilities. Yet even in boardrooms and laboratories, intuition quietly persists. Scientists often speak of sudden insights that arrive not after long calculation, but in a flash of clarity. Artists describe works that come to them fully formed in a moment of inspiration. Soldiers and emergency workers tell of split-second choices that saved lives, decisions made too quickly for rational analysis, yet somehow correct. Could it be that in these moments, the mind is leaning ever so slightly into tomorrow, feeling its contours before reason has a chance to intervene? Experiments on presentiments suggest that something like this might indeed be happening. The body responds before the stimulus arrives, hinting at a sensitivity woven into our biology. Heartbeats quicken, skin becomes subtly more conductive, the pupils expand, all in preparation for what has not yet occurred. These changes are not dramatic enough to announce themselves in everyday life, but they are real enough to be measured. And when researchers compile the results across many studies, the pattern becomes difficult to dismiss. The human organism seems to carry within it a quiet radar, tuned not only to the present, but also to what lies just ahead. Skeptics point out correctly that biology is full of feedback loops and hidden signals. Maybe these reactions are simply unconscious predictions based on patterns too quick for awareness. But this explanation, while comforting, does not fully account for experiments in which the future event is genuinely random, selected by a computer after the body has already responded. In those cases, no hidden pattern exists to be detected, no subtle cue to follow, and yet the responses appear. What then? Do we cling to coincidence, or do we entertain the possibility that consciousness may not be bound by the walls of the present moment? To explore this possibility is to step into both wonder and discomfort. For if the future can be sensed, even dimly, then the line between choice and destiny becomes blurred. Are we truly free, or are we guided by signals from outcomes already in motion? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between. The future may not be fixed like a stone road, but instead may exist as a branching web of possibilities. Consciousness, in moments of heightened sensitivity, might touch the strongest branches, the paths most likely to unfold. In this way, intuition becomes not a prophecy, but a probability, an internal compass that points toward what is most likely, even if not certain. This perspective helps explain why precognition often comes through emotion rather than intellect. Feelings of dread or relief, attraction or aversion, may be the body's way of signaling which branches of the future loom largest. A parent feels sudden unease about a child's safety, a traveller feels drawn to change plans, a student feels inexplicably confident about a choice. These are not detailed visions of what will happen, but emotional markers of probability, faint but powerful enough to alter behaviour. And when the future arrives, those feelings are remembered as premonitions. Such a view also resonates with traditions that have long placed emotion at the heart of foresight. Ancient shamans did not describe the future in numbers or charts, but in feelings, images, and symbols. The oracle at Delphi spoke in riddles infused with emotion, not instructions written in precise terms. Dreams that foretold events often did so through striking imagery that carried a powerful emotional charge. Across cultures, the language of the future has always been symbolic and emotional, not rational. Perhaps this is because emotion is the natural medium of precognition, the way the body translates faint signals from tomorrow into something we can feel today. Imagine walking into a darkened room where you cannot see the furniture but you can sense its presence in the shift of air, the faintest echo of your own footsteps. You may not know exactly where each object is, but your body adjusts subtly, steering you away from collision. Precognition may work in a similar way. It does not deliver a clear picture of the future, but provides enough of a signal to nudge us towards safer or more meaningful paths. Most of the time, we ignore it, relying instead on reason and habit. But every so often, when the stakes are high or the emotion strong, the signal becomes clear enough to guide us in ways we only recognize afterward. As the night deepens and you let these ideas settle, notice how they blur the border between science and story, between measurement and myth. We do not yet know how consciousness works, or why time flows as it does, or what lies at the intersection of mind and matter. What we do know is that humans across all ages have felt the tug of tomorrow in the quiet spaces of their lives. Some have called it intuition, others prophecy, others coincidence. But whatever the name, the experience is real, and it continues to invite us to question the nature of reality itself. If you think back on your own life, perhaps you will remember such moments. The decision that felt irrational at the time but proved wise. The dream that seemed nonsensical until events revealed its meaning. The sudden urge to reach out to someone, just in time. These are not just stories to entertain. They may be evidence, however faint, of a mind that is larger than the present. A consciousness that brushes against the future like fingers, tracing the edge of a curtain before it is drawn back. And in these moments, we are reminded that reality may be stranger and more beautiful than we allow ourselves to believe. Every mystery becomes richer when we consider how it has been understood across cultures, because no matter how advanced our instruments become, human beings have always turned first to stories to make sense of the unknown. Precognition, foresight, the idea of touching the future. These have never been confined to laboratories. They have been woven into myth, ritual, and tradition for as long as humans have left traces of themselves on stone and parchment. In ancient Greece, people travelled days or weeks across mountains to consult the oracle of Delphi, a priestess who would enter trance and speak in cryptic phrases believed to reveal the will of Apollo. Her answers were never simple, but rulers and generals shaped decisions of war and peace around her visions. For the Greeks, the future was not fixed but could be glimpsed in riddles, enough to guide action. In Rome, augurs watched the flight of birds or the entrails of animals, believing patterns in nature revealed what was about to unfold. The message was that the future left fingerprints in the present, and those trained to read them could interpret what was to come. Far away in the Americas, shamans drank bitter brews that shifted perception, reporting visions of hunts, battles, or storms not yet arrived. Among the indigenous peoples of Australia, the dream time was understood as a realm outside ordinary chronology, a space where ancestors and spirits moved freely through past, present, and future. To enter the dream time in ritual or vision was to step outside the linear flow of ordinary life and into a continuum where tomorrow already existed alongside yesterday. In the temples of Egypt, priests recorded dreams on papyrus and carved omens into stone, convinced that the gods whispered secrets of what was to come in the silent hours of sleep. These practices were not curiosities. They shaped the course of civilizations. They show us that humans, across time and geography, have always sensed that the boundary of the present is porous, that reality leaks forward and backward in ways we do not fully understand. Skeptics may argue that these traditions relied on superstition, on the human tendency to remember hits and forget misses, and it is true that many predictions were vague, open to interpretation, or simply wrong. But what matters is not whether every prophecy was accurate, but that cultures everywhere treated the possibility of foresight as real and useful. To them, it was a tool, even a necessity. Just as sailors trusted the stars to guide their journeys, people trusted intuition, ritual, and vision to navigate the unknown waters of time. It is remarkable that this theme is so widespread that it cannot be dismissed as mere cultural accident. The details differ, but the essence remains. Somewhere deep in human experience lies the conviction that we can sometimes sense what is coming. Modern science, with its focus on controlled experiments, might seem far removed from these traditions. Yet when researchers like Dean Radin or Julia Mossbridge describe their findings, the echoes are uncanny. Where an oracle once trembled with visions, a subject in a laboratory shows spikes in brain activity before a shocking image appears. Where a shaman once dreamed of storms, a modern dreamer records visions in a journal and later finds they match real events. The symbols have changed, electrodes instead of incense, statistics instead of chance, but the underlying mystery is the same. This parallel suggests that science and tradition are not enemies but companions, each approaching the question of consciousness and time from different directions. If we listen closely, we might even find that tradition holds clues science has overlooked. Rituals often involved altered states, fasting, chanting, solitude, or substances that shifted perception. These conditions may have silenced the busy chatter of the conscious mind, allowing subtler signals from the body and subconscious to surface. Today, meditation research shows that quieting the mind increases sensitivity to faint internal cues. Brain scans of long-term meditators reveal unusual patterns of connectivity, almost as if their minds are better tuned to perceive information outside normal awareness. Could it be that ancient rituals, refined over centuries, were practical methods to enhance whatever natural precognitive ability humans possess? Consider also the role of belief. In societies where visions and premonitions were valued, people reported them more often and acted upon them. In societies that dismiss such experiences as delusion, people are more likely to ignore or forget them. Modern studies suggest that expectation shapes outcome. Participants who believe they might succeed in precognition tasks often perform better than those who approach with skepticism or fear. This suggests that culture itself may determine how much of our potential we allow ourselves to access. When a whole community treats foresight as possible, individuals within it may naturally develop stronger sensitivity to future signals. Yet we must not romanticize the past. History is full of charlatans who exploited belief in prophecy for power or profit. Not every oracle spoke truth. Not every dream carried meaning. The challenge for us today is to separate the gold from the sand, to honor genuine experiences without surrendering to illusion. Science, with its demand for replication and rigor, provides tools for this task, just as tradition provides centuries of testimony that the phenomena is worth studying. Between the two lies a fertile ground where understanding might grow. Perhaps what is most humbling is the realization that despite all our progress, the questions remain the same. We still wonder whether dreams can reveal more than memory. We still debate whether intuition is just unconscious pattern recognition or something deeper. We still search for meaning in coincidences, in synchronicities that feel too perfect to ignore. The difference is that now we have instruments to measure what once could only be told in stories. A random number generator can track deviations when millions focus on a global event. An EEG can reveal brainwaves shifting seconds before a stimulus appears. These measurements do not banish the mystery. They give it sharper edges, making the question more precise. As we drift further into this exploration, it becomes clear that the boundary between past traditions and present research is not as sharp as it seems. Both are voices in the same conversation, echoing across centuries, each insisting that time may be more fluid than our clocks suggest. When a scientist sees anticipatory brain activity, she is, in a sense, observing the same human experience that once made an oracle tremble or a shaman dream. Different languages, same mystery. So tonight, as you let these ideas settle in your mind, imagine yourself as part of that long lineage. Imagine the ancient traveller entering the temple at Delphi, unsure what words the oracle will speak. Imagine the shaman in the forest, chanting softly by the fire as visions unfold. Imagine the priest in Egypt, unrolling papyrus to record a dream that feels like a message. And then imagine the modern researcher, watching a screen as electrodes trace the hidden rhythms of the mind. All are seeking the same thing, a glimpse beyond the present, a hint that the future is not entirely closed. In that continuity lies a profound truth. Humanity has always sensed that time may be more mysterious than we dare admit. And whether through myth, ritual, or experiment, we keep returning to the same question, one that refuses to let us go. There is a word that often appears in conversations about the mysterious ways time seems to bend around human experience: synchronicity. The Swiss psychologist Carl Gustav Jung introduced it to describe coincidences that feel too meaningful to be accidents. He spoke of moments when inner life and outer events line up in ways that defy logic. You think of an old friend for the first time in years, and that very day they call. You dream of a symbol, and the next morning you find it carved into a wall you have never noticed before. Jung did not believe these were simply tricks of chance. He suggested that they pointed to an underlying order, a hidden web connecting mind and matter, past and future. For him, synchronicity was not about predicting the future in a mechanical sense, but about glimpsing the threads that bind reality together. What makes synchronicity fascinating is that it often carries the emotional charge of a premonition. It feels as if the universe is whispering, nudging, aligning. To dismiss it as coincidence is easy, but the feeling it leaves behind is harder to ignore. Jung collected many accounts from his patients, noting how these meaningful coincidences often arrived at turning points in life, as if the psyche and the world outside were in quiet conversation. A woman dreams of a scarab beetle, a creature rare in her country, and the next day a beetle of nearly the same kind taps against the window during her therapy session. To Jung, this was not mere chance but a sign of connection, a moment where the boundaries between subjective and objective reality dissolved. Modern science, cautious about anything that cannot be measured, tends to treat synchronicity as pattern-seeking, the brain's habit of finding order in randomness. Yet experiments in presentiment and precognition suggest there may be more at play. If consciousness can indeed brush against future events, then synchronicity might be the surface pattern of a deeper process, the visible wave of an unseen current. The meaningful coincidence would not be random at all, but a signal that the mind and the world are entangled through time, each reflecting the other. To understand how such entanglement could work, it helps to return to the language of physics, though not in a cold or technical way. Imagine reality not as a straight line, but as a vast ocean of possibilities. Each moment is like a ripple on that ocean, spreading out in all directions. Sometimes the ripples meet and overlap, creating patterns that look like coincidence to those who see only the surface. But from a wider view, they are the natural result of waves moving through the same medium. Consciousness, then, might be another ripple, not separate from the world but woven into it. When inner thought and outer event align, it is because their waves have met in resonance. In daily life, these resonances often arrive through symbols rather than direct knowledge. A dream of fire before an argument, a song on the radio that seems to answer a private question, an encounter with a stranger who offers words you needed to hear. We are meaning-making creatures, and perhaps meaning itself is the bridge between mind and time. The symbols are not literal maps of the future but guides, pointing toward the direction of unfolding events. They carry a weight that reason cannot explain, and yet they shape our choices and, in turn, the futures we inhabit. Skeptics again will ask, are we not simply weaving stories after the fact, choosing which coincidences to remember and which to forget? This criticism has force, and it is wise to acknowledge it. Yet what if both are true? What if the human tendency to create stories is not just a flaw, but part of the mechanism through which precognition works? By weaving patterns, we become sensitive to threads that stretch into the future. Our narrative minds may act like antennas, tuning into signals that reason alone would miss. Thus, synchronicity becomes not only an experience but a skill, one that can be cultivated through attention, openness, and reflection. In some traditions, synchronicity is not only acknowledged but honoured. The I Ching, an ancient Chinese text often used for divination, works not by predicting outcomes directly, but by casting symbols at moments of decision. The idea is that the way the coins fall, or the lines are drawn, reflects the state of the universe at that instant, including the hidden currents of the future. To a modern rationalist, this seems absurd. How could random coins reveal anything meaningful? But if consciousness is indeed connected to time in non-linear ways, then the symbols may act as mirrors of probability, revealing the shape of things yet to come. The act of consultation itself might tune the mind to patterns it would otherwise overlook. We see similar practices elsewhere. In West African traditions, diviners cast shells or bones, interpreting their positions as messages. In medieval Europe, astrologers studied the alignment of stars, believing they reflected earthly events. In indigenous American rituals, visions induced by drumming or plants were seen as guides for the community. Though the methods differ, the principle is consistent. The future is not entirely hidden, and signs of it can be read in symbols, synchronicities, and altered states of consciousness. Modern research has begun to circle back to this idea, albeit in different language. Studies of creativity, for instance, show that sudden insights often arise in states of relaxed focus, when the mind is open to associations rather than fixated on logic. These moments of inspiration often feel as if they come from outside the self, arriving fully formed. Writers describe stories that seem to dictate themselves. Musicians hear melodies they did not compose. Inventors sketch machines that appear in dreams. Perhaps these are forms of synchronicity between the individual and their future creations, the mind catching whispers of what it is about to bring into being. There is also evidence that synchronicities cluster around moments of transformation. People going through crises or breakthroughs often report an increase in meaningful coincidences, as if the boundary between self and world thins during times of change. It is in these moments that life feels most alive, most guided, even if the guidance comes in the form of subtle signs rather than clear instructions. The question then is not whether such signs are real, but how we choose to respond. Do we ignore them as accidents, or do we allow them to shape our choices, trusting that consciousness may know more than reason admits? As you sit with this idea, imagine your own life as a tapestry. Each thread is a choice, each colour a possibility. Most of the time you see only the part you're weaving in the present, but every so often light catches the fabric in a way that reveals patterns stretching into the distance. These glimmers are synchronicities, hints that the design is larger than you can see. Whether you interpret them as divine messages, subconscious signals, or quantum echoes does not matter as much as the fact that they open you to wonder. And perhaps wonder is the point. For in wonder we remain open to possibilities beyond the limits of logic. In wonder we walk more gently, listening for whispers, watching for signs. In wonder we remember that time itself may be wider than our clocks, and that consciousness in its mysterious depth may touch more than the present. When synchronicity visits, whether in a dream, a symbol, or a chance encounter, it invites us to step into that wider view, if only for a moment, and feel the threads of tomorrow brushing against our lives today. To approach the mystery of precognition from another angle, we can turn to the world of dreams. For most of us, dreams are strange landscapes stitched together from fragments of memory, fears, and desires. They are filled with shifting scenes and unlikely encounters, the mind's nightly theatre where logic bends and meaning hides beneath symbols. Yet throughout history, people have believed that some dreams reach beyond the present into the realm of the future. The Bible tells of Joseph interpreting Pharaoh's dreams of fat and lean cattle as a warning of famine to come. Ancient Chinese texts recorded imperial dreams, treating them as messages for the kingdom. Indigenous traditions on every continent speak of dream journeys where ancestors reveal events yet to unfold. Even in modern times, many quietly admit they have dreamed of something before it happened, though they hesitate to share for fear of disbelief. The scientific study of dreams and precognition is delicate, for the very nature of dreams makes them slippery to measure. They are private, fleeting, and often forgotten upon waking. But researchers who have tried to capture them systematically have found intriguing patterns. Julia Mossbridge, among others, kept detailed journals of her own dreams, writing them down immediately upon waking to prevent memory from being reshaped by later events. She found that a surprising number of these entries aligned with future experiences, not in vague themes but in specific details. When she gathered accounts from others who did the same, the pattern repeated. Dreams often contained elements that matched future reality with a clarity that chance alone struggled to explain. There is something uniquely fitting about the idea that precognition appears most vividly in dreams. Sleep loosens the grip of rational thought, opening the mind to associations and images it would normally reject. If consciousness can stretch through time, it may do so most freely when freed from the strict focus of waking life. dreams become a canvas where fragments of the future can appear, disguised as symbols or woven into stories that only later make sense. This explains why dream precognition often feels uncanny in retrospect, rather than prophetic in the moment. A person dreams of a ship in stormy seas, and later sees a news story of a ferry disaster. The dreamer did not know the meaning in advance, but the resonance afterward is undeniable. Skeptics counter that dreams are so varied and plentiful that some are bound to resemble future events by coincidence. We dream every night, and with billions of dreamers on Earth, coincidences are inevitable. This is true, but the challenge lies in the frequency and specificity of matches. If precognitive dreams occur more often than chance predicts, and with sharper details than coincidence would suggest, then something more is happening. Controlled experiments have even been attempted. Participants are asked to dream about a picture or event that will be chosen randomly in the future. In some cases, their dream reports show statistically significant matches with the randomly chosen targets, as if their unconscious minds had reached forward to glimpse what was coming. One of the most remarkable aspects of dream precognition is how it blends the symbolic and the literal. A dream may not show an event exactly as it will occur, but may present symbols that carry its emotional weight. A man dreams of a collapsing bridge, then later suffers a financial collapse that feels equally devastating. A woman dreams of dark clouds filling her kitchen, then days later receives news of an illness in her family. To dismiss such dreams as coincidence is to ignore the deep language of the unconscious, which often speaks in metaphors rather than direct images. If precognition works through this symbolic channel, then the future may not be shown in exact detail, but in emotional resonance, leaving it to the dreamer to interpret. Cultures have long treated dream interpretation as a sacred art. In Mesopotamia, priests recorded dream symbols on clay tablets, linking them to future events. In Greece, temples dedicated to Asclepius invited the sick to sleep within their walls, believing healing dreams would reveal cures. In many indigenous cultures, young people undergo dream quests as part of initiation, seeking visions that will guide their lives. These practices suggest that dreams have always been seen as bridges between the human mind and the larger flow of time. Modern neuroscience, with its brain scans and theories of memory consolidation, offers another perspective, but it cannot erase the timeless human conviction that dreams sometimes carry messages from beyond the present. There is also the question of collective dreaming. Anthropologists have recorded cases where entire communities report similar dreams before significant events. Villages in the South Pacific tell of shared dreams warning of storms, leading to preparations that saved lives. Families sometimes speak of multiple members dreaming of the same symbol before a tragedy. In modern settings, psychologists have noted clusters of people reporting similar dream themes before global events, such as natural disasters or political upheavals. Could consciousness, in its dream state, be tapping into a collective layer of reality that registers disturbances in the future? The idea is speculative but resonates with Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of symbols and archetypes that connect all humans. Dream precognition also raises questions about choice. If we dream of an event before it happens, does that mean the event is destined, or can the dream serve as a warning that allows us to change course? Stories suggest both possibilities. Some people report that after dreaming of danger, they altered their plans and avoided harm. Others report dreams of events that came true no matter what they did. Perhaps the truth lies in the quantum view of probability. The future exists as a field of possibilities, and dreams tune us into the ones most likely. By acting on them, we may shift which path becomes reality. In this way, dreams are not strict prophecies, but signals, guiding us through the branching maze of time. As you drift into your own night's rest, consider how your dreams might fit into this mystery. Think of the images that have stayed with you long after waking, the ones that carried a weight you could not explain. Were they fragments of memory reshuffled, or were they whispers from the future? We may never know for sure, but the act of paying attention itself changes us. Keeping a dream journal, reflecting on symbols, honouring the strange logic of the unconscious, these practices open us to the possibility that the mind is more expansive than we imagine. They remind us that the night is not merely a pause in life, but a frontier where time itself may loosen, offering glimpses of what lies ahead. And so, in the quiet hours, The boundary between present and future blurs. The dreamer lies still, eyes closed, yet consciousness drifts across landscapes that may belong not only to memory, but to possibility. Whether by chance or by design, whether by neurons firing or by threads of time unravelling, these visions carry a sense of wonder that cannot be denied. They invite us to consider that reality is larger than the waking world, and that in sleep we sometimes step beyond the moment into a place where tomorrow is already waiting. The mystery of precognition becomes even more intriguing when we shift our focus from individual experiences to the possibility that consciousness might operate on a collective scale. If a single mind can sometimes catch whispers of what lies ahead, then what happens when many minds, spread across continents, all register subtle signals of the same future event? This question has drawn not only philosophers, but also scientists into experiments that seem almost unbelievable at first glance. One of the most famous is the Global Consciousness Project, a long-running effort to measure whether mass human awareness can influence machines designed to produce pure randomness. The project, launched in the late 1990s by researchers at Princeton, connected random number generators in locations around the world to a central database. These devices were supposed to spit out sequences of ones and zeros in complete unpredictability, like tossing a coin endlessly. And yet, during moments of global significance, terrorist attacks, natural disasters, or celebrations watched by millions, the machines appeared to drift from randomness, as if reality itself were bending in response to the focused attention of humanity. To those who believe consciousness is confined to the skull, such findings seem absurd. How could thoughts, feelings, or collective grief ripple outward to influence machines? Yet the data showed correlations too consistent to dismiss entirely. Skeptics argued about methodology, pointing to the difficulty of defining what counts as a global event, or suggesting that researchers might unconsciously adjust the timing of their analyses to fit patterns. But supporters countered that the odds against chance were staggering, and that the anomalies often appeared just before the events unfolded, as if the network of random number generators was registering the shock of the future in advance. If true, this would suggest that consciousness is not only personal, but also shared, not only tied to neurons, but woven into the very fabric of the world. Imagine billions of human beings connected like threads in a vast net, each vibrating faintly in response to the tremors of what is coming. When enough of those threads vibrate together, the signal grows strong enough to leave a trace in the physical world. This vision recalls the old myths of collective prophecy, where entire communities felt forewarnings of famine or war, but now dressed in the modern language of data streams and statistics. There are stories that support this idea even outside the laboratory. In some villages struck by tsunamis, survivors recall that animals fled inland hours before the waves struck, and that many locals reported uneasy dreams or feelings of dread the night before. In wartime, soldiers have spoken of sudden silences falling over camps, an atmosphere thick with foreboding just before surprise attacks. In modern cities, people describe days when everything feels charged, as though an unseen storm is approaching, only to learn later of disasters or upheavals. Whether coincidence or connection, these patterns invite us to consider that awareness may operate on scales larger than the individual, whispering warnings in a language we do not yet fully understand. Carl Jung's notion of the collective unconscious takes on new meaning in this light. Jung described it as a reservoir of shared symbols and archetypes that all humans draw upon. But what if it is also a field of shared sensitivity to time, a place where minds overlap not only in meaning but in foresight? If dreams can sometimes reveal the future to individuals, perhaps collective dreams or moods can do the same for societies. This would explain why cultures across the world have long relied on oracles, prophets, or communal rituals of divination, not because one person alone held the power, but because the group itself was attuned to shifts in reality. The seer was simply the voice giving shape to what many already felt. Science, of course, treads carefully around such ideas. The language of fields and connections easily slips into vagueness, if not grounded in evidence. But once again, quantum physics offers metaphors that stretch our imagination. Entanglement shows us that particles can remain linked across space and time, acting as if they are part of a single system no matter the distance. If matter behaves this way, could consciousness, built from matter yet not reducible to it, also display entangled properties? Perhaps individual minds are not isolated islands, but nodes in a greater network, capable of resonating together when the future trembles. This perspective changes how we think about intuition and precognition. It is not only about solitary visions or private dreams, but about shared feelings, atmospheres, and currents that sweep through groups. The sense of something in the air before a historic moment may not be mere metaphor. It may be a description of real, though subtle, signals felt collectively. Artists often say they capture the spirit of the times without knowing how. Social movements seem to surge suddenly, as if driven by invisible tides. What if these tides are partially shaped by consciousness brushing against futures waiting to arrive? Consider creativity itself. When two inventors on opposite sides of the world develop the same breakthrough at nearly the same time, we call it multiple discovery. The calculus of Newton and Leibniz, the theory of evolution from Darwin and Wallace, the telephone from Bell and Gray, all appeared in pairs, as though ideas were ripening in the collective mind, waiting to be picked. Some argue this is simply the result of similar conditions leading to similar conclusions. But others wonder if consciousness as a whole anticipates the future, scattering glimpses to those most receptive. The dream of one becomes the invention of another, until finally the idea manifests in the world, no longer potential but actual. The implications of collective precognition are profound. If groups can sense the future together, then perhaps human society already operates with an unconscious form of foresight. Markets shift not only because of rational analysis, but because of moods that ripple ahead of events. Elections swing on waves of intuition, as much as on arguments. Even the rhythms of culture, the sudden rise of new music, art, or technology, may be guided by unseen premonitions. In this sense, history itself might be shaped by a dialogue between the present and the future, with consciousness acting as the bridge. Yet caution is needed. The danger of believing too strongly in collective foresight is that it can slip into superstition or manipulation. Leaders throughout history have claimed prophetic powers to control their followers, and mass hysteria has often been fueled by imagined signs of doom. The challenge is to recognize the possibility of shared precognition without abandoning discernment. It is not about surrendering to visions uncritically, but about listening carefully, measuring patiently, and distinguishing between genuine signals and the noise of fear. As night deepens, let yourself imagine humanity not as isolated individuals, but as a single great mind dreaming across time. Each of us carries fragments of foresight, tiny sparks that may seem meaningless on their own, but together they form patterns, whispers of tomorrow carried on the wind of today. Perhaps this is why we feel synchronicity, why dreams sometimes echo reality before it arrives, why moods shift collectively in ways we cannot explain. It is not proof, not certainty, but an invitation. An invitation to wonder whether consciousness, personal and shared, is more than the sum of neurons, more than the record of the past, but also a participant in the unfolding of the future. The more we explore the possibility of precognition, the more it forces us to reconsider one of the most fundamental assumptions of human life, the nature of time itself. We are taught to think of time as an arrow, flying from the past into the present, and then onward into the future. The clocks on our walls, the calendars on our desks, the wrinkles on our faces all seem to confirm this simple order. Yet when we peer beneath the surface of experience, cracks appear in this tidy picture. Physics, psychology, and even personal testimony hint that time may not be as rigid as we imagine. Instead of an arrow, perhaps it's a river, looping and meandering, with eddies and currents that allow information to flow both downstream and back again. If consciousness can sense the future, it suggests that our ordinary view of time is incomplete, a convenience for daily living but not the full truth. In physics, this suspicion has grown stronger over the past century. Albert Einstein's theory of relativity showed that time is not absolute but relative, bound to the speed at which we move and the gravity we experience. To a traveller moving near the speed of light, seconds stretch into hours, while for those left behind, hours pass as usual. Time is elastic, shaped by motion and mass. This was astonishing enough, but relativity also introduced the idea of space-time, a four-dimensional fabric where past, present and future exist together. From this perspective, all events are laid out like a map. We move through them, experiencing one moment after another, but the moments themselves already exist in the structure of the universe. If that is true, then precognition is not about peeking into something that does not yet exist, but about glimpsing parts of the map before we arrive at them. Quantum physics complicates matters even further. In experiments where particles are sent through slits of light, their behavior seems to depend not only on what is happening now, but also on how they will be measured in the future. In so-called delayed choice experiments, the decision of an observer made in the present appears to retroactively determine how a particle behaved earlier. This phenomenon, while still debated, suggests that causality, the idea that the past creates the present, may not be the whole story. Effects may influence causes, the future may ripple into the past, and time may not flow in a single direction, but in a dialogue of possibilities. Philosophers have long wrestled with this. Some argue that the future is fixed, already written, and that our sense of choice is an illusion. Others argue that the future is open, a cloud of potential that solidifies only when we reach it. Precognition sits uncomfortably between these views. It suggests that the future can be glimpsed, at least in outline, which implies it exists in some form. But the fact that foreknowledge can sometimes alter outcomes, dreams that warn of accidents that are then avoided, suggests that the future is not entirely locked. It is as though reality is both written and unwritten, both determined and free, depending on the level at which we observe it. To grasp this paradox, imagine a book already printed, its chapters and ending fixed. From one angle, everything is determined. Yet imagine also that the book contains interactive passages, places where the reader chooses a path, creating a different route through the story. Both perspectives are true. The book is finished, and yet the experience of reading it is open. Time may be similar. The structure of possibility is there, already existing, but our choices carve unique paths through it. Precognition, in this view, is a glimpse of a page we have not yet turned, a page whose details may shift depending on how we arrive at it. This vision of time also aligns with reports from altered states of consciousness. Mystics, meditators, and those who have undergone near-death experiences often describe stepping into a realm where time collapses, where past, present, and future exist at once. They speak of seeing their lives not as a sequence but as a whole, like a tapestry laid out in a single glance. For them, precognition is not an anomaly, but a natural part of this expanded awareness. They return to ordinary life changed, convinced that our usual sense of time is a narrow window onto a much larger reality. Whether these experiences are neurological illusions or genuine glimpses of another dimension remains debated, but their consistency across cultures and centuries suggests that they touch something real in human perception. If time is indeed more flexible than our clocks tell us, what does that mean for daily life? It may mean that our intuitions, dreams, and synchronicities are not strange accidents, but reflections of a deeper truth. It may mean that when we feel drawn to pause, to change course, to call a friend, we are responding not just to present cues, but to subtle signals from the near future. It may also mean that our choices carry more weight than we imagine, for by acting differently, we may shift which version of the future becomes real. In this sense, precognition is not only about knowing, but about responsibility. To glimpse a possible future is to be given the chance to shape it. There are practical implications here, even if we treat them cautiously. Imagine if people train themselves to pay attention to subtle feelings and dreams, not as absolute predictions, but as hints of probability. Pilots, doctors, or firefighters might be better prepared for sudden crises. Leaders might sense dangers earlier and act more wisely. Ordinary individuals might avoid accidents, seize opportunities, or choose paths that align with deeper needs. Precognition would not replace rational analysis, but complement it, offering another layer of guidance in a world full of uncertainty. At the same time, we must acknowledge the danger of misuse. If people believe the future is fixed and can be known, they may surrender their freedom, allowing prophets or leaders to dictate their choices. History is full of tragedies where false visions led crowds astray. The challenge then is balance, to explore precognition with humility, to test it with rigor, to embrace its wonder without abandoning reason. It is not a replacement for logic or evidence, but a companion to them, a reminder that reality may be more mysterious than our models allow. As you let these thoughts drift through your mind tonight, picture time not as a straight road, but as a vast landscape. You walk across it one step at a time, seeing only what is before you. Yet in the distance, peaks and valleys already exist, waiting to be reached. Sometimes a sound carries from those mountains, a faint echo of the future reaching back to the present. You may not know exactly what it means, but it stirs you, reminding you that life is larger than the moment. Whether through dreams, intuitions, or synchronicities, these echoes invite us to listen more carefully, to walk with a sense of wonder, and to remember that time, like consciousness itself, may hold secrets far beyond our current understanding. There is a moment in every exploration of precognition when the conversation inevitably turns to free will. If we can sense the future, even dimly, then what does that say about our ability to choose? Are we simply walking along a path already laid out, our decisions nothing more than illusions of autonomy? Or is the future a shifting field of possibilities, and precognition merely a way of sensing which paths are most likely? This tension has occupied philosophers for centuries, and it continues to haunt modern science. The stakes are not small, for the way we understand time and choice influences how we live, how we love, and how we take responsibility for our actions. Some traditions have leaned toward determinism, the belief that the future is fixed. In Hindu cosmology, time is seen as cyclical, vast ages repeating endlessly, suggesting that every event is part of an eternal pattern. In ancient Greece, the concept of fate was woven into mythology. The Moirai, or fates, spun, measured, and cut the thread of each life, indifferent to human desire. In Christianity, debates raged over predestination, whether God had already chosen who would be saved and who would be lost. In each case, the idea of precognition fit easily, for if the future is already written, then glimpsing it is merely reading ahead in the script. Yet other traditions emphasize freedom. Existentialist philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre argued that humans are condemned to be free, burdened with the responsibility of shaping their own lives. To them, the idea of a fixed future undermines the very essence of human existence. If precognition were real, they would argue, it could only mean that we sense probabilities, not certainties, for otherwise choice itself would be an illusion. Modern quantum physics seems to support this more flexible view. Instead of a single future, it offers a cloud of potential outcomes, each collapsing into reality only when observed or enacted. From this perspective, precognition is not about inevitability, but about sensitivity to the weight of probabilities. Stories of premonitions often support this idea. A woman dreams of a car accident and chooses to delay her trip, avoiding the danger entirely. A man feels an unexplainable dread about a business deal and withdraws, later learning it would have ruined him. In these cases, the premonition did not describe an unchangeable fate, but served as a warning, allowing the person to alter the outcome. It suggests that precognition may be less about foretelling destiny, and more about offering guidance, signals that help us navigate the branching paths of time. But there are also accounts that feel deterministic. People dream of events that come true despite their attempts to prevent them. A man dreams of his father's passing and finds that it happens exactly as envisioned. A community reports ominous visions before a natural disaster that no one could stop. These cases suggest that some futures may be fixed, at least at certain scales, beyond the reach of human choice. The challenge is that both types of stories exist, and together they create a paradox. The future is both open and closed, both flexible and predetermined. Perhaps the truth lies in the interaction between scales. Small events may be malleable, shaped by choice, while larger events, death, natural forces, historical shifts, move with a momentum too great to be altered. To picture this, imagine sailing on a vast ocean. The winds and currents push the ship in powerful directions, representing the larger forces of fate. Yet within those constraints, the sailor can adjust the sails, steer the rudder, and choose a path across the waves. The destination may be inevitable, but the journey can vary. Precognition, then, is like feeling the subtle changes in the wind before they arrive, allowing the sailor to act wisely. It is neither full control nor total surrender, but a dance between freedom and necessity. Neuroscience adds another layer of complexity. Some experiments suggest that the brain prepares for actions milliseconds before we become consciously aware of deciding them. This has led some researchers to claim that free will is an illusion, that we only rationalize choices already made by unconscious processes. Yet others argue that consciousness still plays a role in vetoing or shaping these impulses. If precognition operates at the unconscious level, it may be part of this hidden preparation, guiding us before awareness catches up. In this sense, free will is not destroyed but enriched, informed by signals from both the present and the near future. The ethical implications are profound. If we can glimpse the future even partially, then we carry a responsibility to respond. To ignore a warning dream, to dismiss an intuition that could save a life, may be a kind of negligence. At the same time, we must be careful not to become enslaved by visions, living in fear of what might come. The balance lies in listening with openness but acting with discernment, using precognition as one voice among many in the symphony of decision-making. History provides examples of how difficult this balance can be. Leaders have acted on prophecies that led to disaster, convinced they were seeing destiny unfold. Others have ignored visions and suffered consequences. The lesson is not that precognition is false or true, but that it is delicate, requiring humility. Just as sailors learn to read the sea without assuming they can control the storm, so too must we learn to read the subtle signals of time without imagining we command them. In personal life, this humility may take the form of paying quiet attention, keeping a journal of dreams and intuitions, reflecting on synchronicities, noticing patterns without leaping to conclusions. Over time, individuals may develop a sense of which signals carry weight and which are noise. This cultivation of discernment is similar to training in any art. Musicians learn to distinguish harmony from cacophony. Painters learn to see shades invisible to others, and perhaps dreamers learn to sense futures hidden in the folds of time. As you listen now, perhaps you can recall moments when you felt caught between fate and choice, a decision that seemed free but later felt inevitable, a path you resisted but found yourself walking anyway. Or perhaps the opposite, a moment when you felt guided by a signal, took a different route, and realized later that you had shaped your own future. These memories reveal the strange dance of destiny and freedom, a dance that precognition illuminates, but does not resolve. So as the night grows deeper, hold both truths gently. The future may be written in part, yet unwritten in part. We may not control the tides, but we can adjust our sails. Precognition does not bind us. It invites us to listen more carefully to the currents of time. And in listening, we discover that our choices matter, not because they change everything, but because they shape the path we take through the vast and mysterious ocean of what is to come. When we ask how precognition might be possible, one path of inquiry leads us into the very architecture of the brain. For centuries, the mind was imagined as a machine of cogs and gears, then as an intricate network of wires firing signals from one point to another. But recent decades have revealed a more mysterious picture. The brain is not simply a collection of switches flipping on and off, but a living landscape of rhythms, waves, and fields, each pulsing in patterns that extend beyond individual neurons. Within this landscape lies the possibility that consciousness is not confined to the present moment, but is instead a dynamic process reaching in multiple directions, touching past, present, and future all at once. Researchers studying the brain's rhythms have found that even at rest, neural activity is not random, but highly organized. Slow waves ripple across hemispheres, synchronizing distant regions as though the brain were playing a symphony rather than a set of isolated notes. Some scientists propose that these rhythms allow information to be integrated across time, binding together what we perceive, what we remember, and what we anticipate. In this sense, the brain may be designed not only to process the now, but also to prepare for what is coming. Predictive processing, as it is often called, is already recognized as a core function of the nervous system. Every moment, the brain is making predictions about what the next moment will bring, refining them as new input arrives. This predictive ability explains much of ordinary perception. When you listen to music, your brain is already anticipating the next note, which is why a wrong chord feels jarring. When you walk downstairs, your brain calculates the next step before your foot lands. But what if this predictive capacity extends further than milliseconds or seconds? What if the same mechanisms that let us anticipate a sound or a step also allow subtle glimpses into events seconds, minutes, or even days ahead? Precognition may not be a separate function, but an extension of the brain's natural tendency to project into the future. Some theories suggest that consciousness might harness quantum effects within the brain to achieve this extension. Microtubules, tiny structures within neurons, have been proposed as potential sites for quantum processes. Though controversial, this idea gained support from discoveries that quantum effects operate in biological systems more often than once believed. Photosynthesis in plants relies on quantum coherence to transfer energy efficiently. Birds navigating across continents may use quantum entanglement in their eyes to sense the Earth's magnetic field. If plants and birds can exploit quantum phenomena for survival, why not the human brain? If quantum states can persist inside neurons, then perhaps consciousness itself arises partly from these delicate processes, and with it the ability to access information that defies ordinary time. Skeptics argue that the brain is too warm and noisy for fragile quantum states to survive. Yet research continues to reveal unexpected resilience of quantum effects in biological environments. The possibility cannot be dismissed outright. If true, then consciousness may be more than the firing of neurons. It may be a quantum phenomenon, entwined with the fabric of space-time itself. In that case, glimpses of the future may not be supernatural but natural, reflections of the way reality is structured at its deepest level. Beyond quantum theories, other neuroscientists focus on how memory and imagination blur into one another. When we remember the past, the same neural circuits activate as when we imagine the future. The brain seems to treat both as forms of mental time travel, drawing on similar networks to reconstruct what has been and to simulate what might be. Perhaps in moments of unusual clarity, these simulations align with actual future events, not by coincidence, but by resonance. In this way, precognition could be seen as memory turned forward, the same machinery of recollection applied to possibilities not yet lived. Dreams again play a role here. During sleep, the brain reorganizes memories, consolidating learning and rehearsing scenarios. If the dreaming brain also draws upon information that leaks backward from the future, then the overlap of memory and foresight becomes complete. A dream feels like a memory because it may, in some sense, be one, a memory of tomorrow. This idea remains speculative, but it resonates with the lived experience of those who awaken to find their dreams mirrored in reality. Whatever the mechanism, the subjective experience of precognition is often emotional rather than intellectual. People rarely describe receiving a detailed list of events. Instead, they feel a heaviness in the chest, a certainty in the gut, an image that lingers with unusual weight. This suggests that the body plays a crucial role. Heart rhythms, hormonal signals, and visceral sensations may all participate in registering future information before the mind can articulate it. Experiments confirm this. Skin conductance, heart rate, and pupil dilation often shift seconds before a stimulus arrives. The body seems to know first, the mind only afterward. This raises another possibility. Perhaps precognition is not a single phenomenon but a layered one. The body senses, the subconscious processes, the conscious mind interprets. Each layer adds complexity but also the potential for distortion. A subtle signal from the body may become exaggerated by imagination, reshaped into a dream, retold as a prophecy. Separating genuine foresight from noise becomes the challenge, one that demands both sensitivity and discipline. For individuals curious about cultivating this sensitivity, traditions offer guidance. Meditation trains attention, allowing practitioners to notice subtle shifts in body and mind. Dream journaling preserves details before they fade, creating a record that can later be compared to real events. Practices of intuition, listening to inner voices, reflecting on coincidences, honoring hunches, encourage openness without demanding certainty. None of these guarantee prophetic visions, but they create the conditions where precognitive signals, if they exist, are less likely to be ignored. Modern technology may one day assist in this cultivation. Already, brain-computer interfaces can detect patterns of neural activity and translate them into commands. Imagine devices that track heart rhythms, brain waves, and skin responses in real time, alerting us when unusual anticipatory signals arise. Such tools could serve as amplifiers for intuition, helping distinguish genuine foresight from ordinary noise. The idea seems futuristic, but the building blocks already exist. Whether humanity will embrace them responsibly is another question. As the night deepens and you reflect on these possibilities, consider how they reshape the image of yourself. You're not a creature locked in the present. reacting only to what has already happened. You are being stretched across time, remembering backward and perhaps remembering forward, sensing the contours of the path ahead even before you see it. Your brain is not merely an engine of calculation, but a bridge between moments, woven into the deeper fabric of reality. Whether through quantum processes, predictive rhythms, or the merging of memory and imagination, the possibility remains that consciousness carries within it the seeds of tomorrow. And when those seeds sprout into dreams, intuitions, or subtle feelings, they remind us that time is not a prison but a landscape, and that the human mind, in ways still mysterious, is already walking its farthest edges. As we follow the thread of precognition deeper, it is worth pausing to consider how culture shapes the way people experience and interpret it. Human beings everywhere dream, feel intuition, and encounter coincidences that seem charged with meaning. Yet what a society believes about these experiences often determines whether they are nurtured, feared, or forgotten. In one culture, a vision might be honoured as a sacred gift. In another, dismissed as delusion. This does not necessarily change the underlying phenomenon, but it profoundly affects how individuals relate to it, how they use it, and whether they speak of it at all. In ancient Mesopotamia, dreams were treated as messages from the gods. Kings employed dream interpreters who studied clay tablets inscribed with symbolic correspondences. If a dream showed rivers overflowing, it might signal invasion. If a lion appeared, it could signify strength or danger depending on context. These interpretations guided political and military decisions, for leaders believed the future revealed itself through symbols that required decoding. Similarly, in ancient Egypt, dream books offered lists of images and their meanings, written in hieroglyphs across papyrus scrolls. A snake might mean illness, a bright star prosperity. The act of recording transformed private visions into public tools, embedding precognition into the structures of power. By contrast, in modern industrial societies, dreams are often relegated to psychology or dismissed as random byproducts of the brain. Children may share dreams freely, but adults are expected to treat them as personal curiosities, not as guides for life. Intuition is sometimes valued in art or entrepreneurship, but rarely in science or governance. When people in such cultures experience a dream that comes true, they may hesitate to share it, fearing ridicule. The phenomenon itself may not differ from that in Mesopotamia or Egypt, but the cultural response silences it. This suggests that precognition is not only a question of what is possible, but of what is permitted. Indigenous cultures often take the opposite stance, weaving precognition into daily life. Among some Native American traditions, young people undertake vision quests, spending days in solitude and fasting until dreams or visions come. The community then interprets these as glimpses of the individual's future role. In parts of the Pacific Islands, communal dreaming is a form of weather prediction, where villagers share and compare dreams to prepare for storms. In the Amazon, shamans use plant medicines that induce altered states, claiming they reveal the futures of both individuals and tribes. These practices treat foresight as normal, not exceptional, and by doing so, they create an environment where people are more likely to notice and act upon their premonitions. Anthropologists studying these societies have sometimes been skeptical, attributing their accuracy to chance or to the clever use of environmental cues. Yet even when controlling for these factors, reports of strikingly accurate foresight remain. More importantly, the communal belief in precognition shapes behavior in ways that may become self-fulfilling. If a village dreams of flood, it may prepare more carefully, and when the flood comes, survival confirms the power of the dreams. Belief itself becomes part of the mechanism, amplifying the usefulness of foresight. This does not mean precognition is purely psychological, but it highlights the delicate interplay between experience and interpretation. In the modern West, interest in precognition often survives at the margins, in spiritual movements, New Age communities, and personal practices like tarot or astrology. Though dismissed by mainstream institutions, these tools provide a framework for people to explore intuitions without fear. The cards, charts, or symbols act as mirrors, reflecting inner feelings and potential futures in ways that can be discussed. Skeptics see this as mere projection, but participants often describe moments of uncanny accuracy, as if the ritual unlocked something their ordinary consciousness could not. Whether or not one believes in the literal mechanisms, the psychological effect is undeniable. People make different choices when they feel guided, and sometimes those choices align with better outcomes. Science, for its part, often struggles to study such culturally embedded practices. Controlled experiments require isolation of variables, yet intuition and foresight rarely appear on command. They arrive unbidden, in the flow of life, influenced by belief, ritual, and context. By stripping away these elements, experiments may sometimes reduce the very conditions that allow precognition to surface. At the same time, cultural testimony without evidence can be misleading, encouraging false prophets and unfounded fears. The challenge, then, is to find ways of honouring cultural richness while also seeking patterns that can be tested. One promising approach is cross-cultural comparison. If people from different societies with no contact report similar forms of precognition, that strengthens the case that something real is happening. Anthropologists have indeed found such similarities. The foretelling dream, the gut feeling of dread before disaster, the symbolic vision that guides action, all appear across continents and centuries. The symbols vary: lions in Mesopotamia, crocodiles in Africa, jaguars in the Amazon. But the structure is the same: a striking image, an emotional charge, a later confirmation. This consistency suggests that precognition may be a universal human capacity, expressed through the lens of culture. Another perspective comes from psychology, which explores how belief in precognition affects well-being. Studies show that people who view dreams and intuitions as meaningful often experience greater resilience in the face of uncertainty. Believing that the future offers hints can reduce anxiety, giving people a sense of guidance even when life feels unpredictable. Of course, belief can also become maladaptive, leading to fatalism or fear if interpreted too rigidly. The balance is delicate. To see foresight as possibility, not fate, as guidance, not command. When held in this way, it can enrich life without enslaving it. As we reflect on cultural variations, we see that precognition is not only a scientific puzzle, but also a mirror of human imagination. It reveals how deeply we long to understand where we're going, to feel that tomorrow is not a complete mystery. It shows that across all societies, people have sought ways to listen for whispers from the future, whether through oracles, dreams, rituals, or experiments. The fact that this quest persists across millennia suggests it speaks to something fundamental in the human condition, a sense that we are creatures stretched across time, and that part of us is already walking in tomorrow. Tonight, as you think of these traditions, imagine yourself moving through a gallery of human history. In one hall, clay tablets etched with dream symbols line the walls. In another, a shaman paints visions on the skin of a drum. In another, a scientist watches brain waves flicker on a screen. Different rooms, different languages, yet all circling the same question: can we know what has not yet happened? And perhaps more importantly, what should we do with that knowledge if we can? Every investigation into precognition eventually encounters the boundary between science and spirituality. For many people, these two worlds appear to stand in opposition, one built on data, logic, and replicable experiments, the other rooted in faith, symbolism, and personal experience. Yet when it comes to the mystery of time and consciousness, the line blurs. Scientists, mystics, philosophers, and ordinary dreamers often describe experiences that echo one another, even if their interpretations differ. At times, the language of spirituality seems to anticipate the discoveries of science. At other times, science seems to stumble upon truths long preserved in spiritual traditions. Perhaps the two are not enemies, but two perspectives peering at the same horizon. Mystics from many traditions have described states of awareness where time collapses. In Hindu philosophy, advanced yogis speak of samadhi, a state of union where past, present, and future dissolve into a single field of consciousness. Christian mystics have described visions where they felt lifted outside the flow of earthly time, able to see events before they occurred. Sufi poets wrote of dreams and intuitions that guided their paths with startling accuracy. In Buddhism, meditation is said to reveal the impermanence of all phenomena, and in deep states, practitioners sometimes report glimpses of events not yet realized. These testimonies, though varied, share a common thread. When the mind quiets and expands, the future sometimes arrives early. Science approaches the same territory with caution but cannot fully dismiss it. Studies on meditation, for example, reveal that long-term practitioners show unusual patterns of brain activity. Their neural rhythms become highly synchronized, and their bodies often respond to stimuli more quickly and subtly than average. This heightened sensitivity may provide a biological basis for why meditators occasionally report precognitive insights. By calming the noise of ordinary thought, they may open themselves to faint signals from the future, signals that in daily life are drowned out. Spiritual disciplines, in this light, may be seen not as magical practices but as training in perception, cultivating the ability to notice what usually goes unnoticed. The overlap between science and spirituality becomes even clearer when we consider the role of symbols. In spiritual traditions, visions of the future are rarely presented as straightforward reports. They come as images, metaphors, or archetypes: a burning city to represent war, a rising sun to represent renewal, a river in flood to represent overwhelming change. Psychologists like Jung argued that such archetypes arise from the collective unconscious, shared structures of meaning that span cultures. Neuroscientists might explain them as the brain's way of compressing complex information into emotionally charged images. Either way, the symbols serve the same purpose: to bridge the gap between what is sensed and what can be understood. Precognition, therefore, may not always be literal. A dream of a collapsing bridge might not foretell an actual bridge, but instead symbolize the collapse of a relationship or a financial failure. The brain, reaching into the fog of the future, may capture the emotional truth but render it in metaphor. Spiritual traditions recognize this, which is why they developed elaborate systems of interpretation. Priests, shamans, and oracles acted as translators, turning dream images into guidance. Science has yet to embrace this symbolic dimension, but perhaps it must, for the raw data of precognition is rarely clear. It arrives in fragments, in riddles, in whispers. Understanding it requires more than measurement. It requires imagination. One of the challenges of this intersection is that spirituality often claims certainty where science demands doubt. A prophet may declare, "This will happen," while a scientist can only say, "Our results suggest a small but consistent effect." Yet perhaps both voices are needed. Certainty inspires action, while doubt guards against illusion. Together they create a tension that prevents either blind faith or rigid denial. The key is to resist the temptation to collapse the mystery into a single answer. Instead, we can hold it open, allowing both science and spirituality to contribute their insights. There are moments in history when this balance was achieved. During the Renaissance, thinkers like Paracelsus combined medicine with mysticism, seeing the body as a reflection of cosmic forces. In the Islamic Golden Age, scholars preserved and expanded both scientific and spiritual knowledge, treating dreams as both psychological and prophetic. In China, Taoist philosophy embraced the interplay of yin and yang, order and mystery, encouraging harmony rather than opposition. These traditions remind us that knowledge need not be divided into hostile camps. The quest to understand time, consciousness, and precognition may be strongest when it honors both the rigor of science and the depth of spirit. For the individual seeker, this integration can be deeply practical. One might keep a dream journal, tracking potential precognitions, while also practicing meditation or prayer to cultivate sensitivity. One might study both statistics and symbolism, learning to see patterns in data and in images. One might approach intuitions not as commands from outside, but as invitations from within, open to reflection and testing. In this way, personal exploration becomes a microcosm of the larger dialogue between science and spirituality. Of course, there are dangers in leaning too far to either side. Rely too heavily on spirituality, and one risks falling into superstition, seeing prophecy in every shadow. Rely only on science, and one risks dismissing genuine experiences that fall outside current models. The art lies in the middle path, open to wonder, grounded in inquiry, humble in the face of uncertainty. In this path, precognition is not proof of supernatural powers, nor a delusion to be explained away, but a frontier, an edge where human consciousness meets the unknown. As you drift deeper into thought tonight, imagine standing at that frontier. On one side, scientists with their instruments, carefully measuring heartbeats and brain waves, looking for signals that precede events. On the other side, mystics with their symbols, describing visions in poetry and prayer. Between them flows a river of mystery carrying whispers from the future. Both groups listen in their own way, and both catch fragments of the same song. If we are wise, we will listen too. Not to choose one side against the other, but to let their melodies intertwine, reminding us that the future is not silent. It hums faintly in our dreams, our intuitions, our synchronicities, waiting for us to notice. And perhaps that is the true gift of precognition, not certainty, not control, but wonder. The wonder of knowing that the boundaries we assume are firm may be porous, that time may be wider than we think, that consciousness may stretch further than we allow. In this wonder, science and spirituality meet, not in competition but in companionship, both pointing toward the same vast mystery of what it means to be human in a universe where tomorrow is already whispering today. If precognition touches the edges of science and spirituality, it also brushes against the daily lives of ordinary people in ways that are often quiet, unnoticed, or unspoken. Most people do not think of themselves as visionaries or prophets. They live their days much as everyone else does, waking, working, loving, worrying. Yet sprinkled throughout these ordinary days are moments that seem to arrive from outside the flow of time. A mother pauses before sending her child to school, feeling a sudden unease she cannot explain. A commuter misses a train by chance, only to discover later that an accident occurred on the route. A friend calls just as you think of them, the timing so perfect it feels as if thought and action were connected across distance. These moments rarely make headlines, but they are the soil in which belief in precognition grows. Surveys suggest that a surprising percentage of people report having experienced a premonition or prophetic dream at least once in their lives. Many keep these experiences private, fearing ridicule, but when asked anonymously, they describe them in detail, a recurring dream of an event that later unfolded, a gut feeling that saved them from danger, a sense of déjà vu so strong it seemed they were reliving a future rather than a past. These personal testimonies may lack the rigor of laboratory experiments, but their sheer number and emotional weight make them difficult to dismiss. They suggest that precognition is not a rare gift for a chosen few, but a capacity that arises spontaneously across the human population. The way people respond to such experiences varies widely. Some treat them as curiosities, interesting but not life-changing. Others see them as sacred, reshaping their worldview. Still others dismiss them, even when the accuracy is uncanny, because acknowledging them would disrupt their sense of order. This diversity of response reveals as much about human psychology as about the phenomenon itself. For precognition is not only about glimpsing the future, it is also about how we integrate that glimpse into our story of reality. If reality is assumed to be strictly linear, then the experience must be ignored. If reality is assumed to be mysterious and flexible, then the experience can be honoured. The choice, in many ways, belongs to the interpreter. One of the most interesting aspects of personal precognition is how it often involves loved ones. People rarely report visions of strangers or distant events. More often, they sense danger or change connected to those closest to them. This suggests that emotion may act as a bridge, amplifying the connection between consciousness and time. Just as a radio antenna must be tuned to the right frequency to receive a signal, perhaps the human mind tunes more strongly to futures that carry emotional significance. A mother dreams of her child's illness, a husband senses his wife's accident, a friend feels compelled to reach out before tragedy strikes. In each case, love seems to open the channel through which information flows. There is a tenderness in this idea, for it implies that precognition is not a cold or mechanical process but one rooted in care. The future may whisper most loudly when it matters most, when lives and bonds are at stake. From this perspective, precognition is not a trick of the mind, but an expression of connection, a way that consciousness stretches itself to protect what it loves. Science may one day measure the mechanisms, but the meaning is already clear in the stories. Foresight often comes clothed in the language of relationship. It is also notable that many experiences of precognition occur in liminal states, between waking and sleeping, between action and rest. People report flashes of foresight while drifting to sleep, while meditating, or in the moment before a crisis fully unfolds. These thresholds seem to loosen the grip of ordinary consciousness, allowing subtler signals to rise. Modern life, with its constant distractions, rarely allows such stillness. Perhaps this is why so many ignore or overlook their own intuitive signals. Yet when quiet returns, whether in dreams or daydreams, the future sometimes slips through the cracks. There are stories of entire communities shaped by such foresight. Fishermen in coastal villages have avoided storms after collective dreams of disaster. Families have altered travel plans based on a relative's intuition, later discovering they narrowly avoided tragedy. Even in contemporary times, people share online forums where they compare premonitions, noting when many dream of the same event. Sometimes these align with real occurrences, sometimes not, but the pattern itself is striking. It suggests that precognition may not be a solitary phenomenon but a shared one, woven into the fabric of human connection. Skeptics point out rightly that anecdotes are not proof. Memory is selective, and human beings are masters of finding meaning after the fact. But even skeptics admit that stories of foresight carry powerful emotional resonance. They shape behavior, influence decisions, and create a sense of mystery in everyday life. Whether or not every story can be explained, the persistence of the phenomenon across cultures and generations indicates it fulfills a deep psychological and perhaps evolutionary function. It may be that by being open to hints of the future, humans became more adaptable, more cautious, more creative. The very belief in foresight may itself be adaptive, encouraging attention to subtle cues in the environment and in relationships. This blending of psychology, culture, and mystery makes precognition a uniquely human experience. It sits at the crossroads of science and story, of body and spirit, of reason and intuition. It resists neat categories because it belongs to all of them. The mother's dream, the oracle's vision, the scientist's experiment, they are different expressions of the same fundamental question. How tightly are we bound to the present, and how far can consciousness reach? As you reflect on your own life, perhaps you recall a moment when you felt guided by something beyond reason. A sudden change of plan, a decision that seemed irrational, but later proved wise, a dream that revealed itself in reality. These moments may not prove anything in the laboratory, but they prove something to you. That life is richer than logic alone, that time sometimes bends to offer glimpses of what is coming. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine your own consciousness as a traveller standing at a crossroads. Behind you lies the road already walked, full of memories and lessons. Before you lies a branching forest of futures, each path hidden in the mist. Sometimes, in the stillness, a sound carries from those paths, a voice, a symbol, a feeling. It may not tell you exactly what awaits, but it tells you enough to step with care, or with courage, or with love. That, perhaps, is the essence of precognition. Not to reveal the future in full, but to remind us that we are not blind as we walk into it. There are signals, there are whispers, there are threads that connect us to tomorrow. All we need to do is listen. If precognition exists in the margins of ordinary life, then it also appears at the frontiers of creativity, where human imagination reaches for what has not yet been. Artists, writers, musicians, and inventors have long described experiences of inspiration that feel less like invention and more like reception, as though ideas arrive from elsewhere, already formed, waiting only to be expressed. These experiences are often described in mystical terms. The poem that writes itself, the melody that falls from the sky, the vision of a painting that arrives fully intact in a dream. When we listen carefully to these accounts, we notice that they often blur the line between imagination and foresight. The artist does not merely imagine a possibility, they sometimes anticipate a future reality. There are countless examples in the history of art and literature. Mary Shelley's novel, Frankenstein, envisioned a world where life could be created in laboratories long before modern genetic science. Jules Verne described submarines, rockets, and moon landings decades before technology made them possible. H.G. Wells imagined atomic bombs with chilling accuracy years before the physics of nuclear fission was discovered. Were these simply extrapolations, clever guesses based on trends, or did these writers, in their dreams and intuitions, touch something deeper, glimpses of futures that would later unfold? The question may never be fully answered, but the pattern is difficult to ignore. Even in music, stories of precognition appear. Paul McCartney has said that the melody for Yesterday, one of the Beatles' most famous songs, came to him in a dream. He woke convinced he must have remembered it from somewhere. So complete and familiar did it sound, but after searching and asking others, he realized it was new. It had arrived whole, as though carried from the future into his sleeping mind. Countless composers and songwriters tell similar stories, melodies appearing in sleep, symphonies heard in flashes of vision, lyrics flowing as if dictated. Perhaps these are simply the fruits of unconscious creativity, but perhaps too they are whispers from futures where the songs already exist. In science and technology, the phenomenon is equally striking. The chemist Friedrich August Kekule famously described dozing by the fire when he saw a vision of a snake biting its own tail. This dream gave him the key insight into the structure of the benzene molecule, a ring rather than a chain, one of the most important discoveries in chemistry. Nikola Tesla often spoke of inventions arriving in his mind complete, machines he could see and test in mental detail before building them in reality. He described these visions as if they were transmissions, arriving fully formed. Thomas Edison, though more pragmatic, used similar methods, drifting into light sleep with steel balls in his hands so that he would wake as soon as dreams began, capturing the ideas they brought. Skeptics would argue that these are simply examples of the brain working in the background, connecting fragments of knowledge until they surface as sudden insights. That may be true in many cases, but what makes the phenomenon curious is how often these insights not only solve present problems but anticipate future discoveries. Verne, Wells, Shelley, they wrote of technologies that did not exist, yet which later arrived. Kekule's dream presented him with a symbol he did not understand until science caught up. Tesla's visions of wireless communication foreshadowed a world he would never live to see. These are not just solutions to known puzzles, they are glimpses of unknown futures. Perhaps creativity itself is a form of precognition, a way the mind reaches into the field of possibilities ahead and brings back fragments. This would explain why inspiration feels so sudden, so otherworldly, so complete. It is not the slow construction of logic, but the quick retrieval of something already waiting. The artist or inventor does not create the future so much as channel it. They become the bridge through which tomorrow enters today. This possibility raises profound questions about the nature of imagination. What if every creative act is also a form of time travel, a way of remembering forward? What if our greatest works of art and science are not merely human inventions, but collaborations between present and future, dialogues across time? It would mean that the human mind is not limited to reacting to the world as it is, but is constantly in touch with the world as it will be. Creativity would then be a kind of precognition, not mystical but essential, the very mechanism by which humanity evolves. History supports this view in another way, the phenomenon of multiple discovery. Time and again, ideas emerge in two or more places almost simultaneously, as if the future is pressing into the present from multiple angles. Newton and Leibniz developed calculus independently. Darwin and Wallace formulated the theory of evolution at nearly the same time. Alexander Graham Bell and Elisha Gray both filed patents for the telephone on the same day. These coincidences suggest that ideas ripen in the collective mind, becoming accessible when the moment is right. Individuals tuned to the future may pluck them first, but the ideas themselves seem to hover, waiting to be born. This collective aspect of creative foresight mirrors the collective precognition observed in communities. Just as entire villages report similar dreams before disasters, entire societies seem to anticipate inventions before they appear. Art and literature become filled with symbols of what is to come. Science fiction in the mid-20th century obsessed over space travel, just as humanity was preparing to reach the stars. Early 21st century films imagined artificial intelligence and global networks just as they became reality. Culture, in this sense, may be a dreaming mind, preparing itself for futures it cannot yet articulate directly. For the individual artist or thinker, the experience of precognitive creativity is both exhilarating and humbling. Exhilarating because the ideas feel like gifts, arriving with clarity. Humbling because they do not feel entirely one's own. The creator becomes a vessel, a witness to something larger. This is why so many describe their greatest works as if they were dictated, not invented. They speak of muses, of visions, of transmissions from beyond. Whether these are metaphors or descriptions, they capture the same truth. Creativity often feels like contact with the future. As you consider this tonight, imagine yourself not as a passive traveller through time, but as an artist of your own life, constantly sketching from glimpses of what lies ahead. The choices you make, the dreams you pursue, the words you speak, all are shaped not only by memory but by foresight, however subtle. You are both remembering and imagining, and in that blend may lie the secret of precognition. For what you imagine today may be a memory of tomorrow, and what you create may already exist in potential, waiting for you to bring it forth. In this light, precognition is not strange at all. It is the essence of being human, the ability to see beyond the moment and to act as if the future were already whispering in our ear. It is why we build, why we paint, why we sing, why we dream. And when those dreams align with reality, when the book or invention or song arrives as if predicted, we recognize what we have always known, that consciousness is not bound by the present but stretches forward, touching what will be, bringing fragments of it into the now. To speak of precognition is also to confront its shadows, for not every glimpse of the future arrives as a gift. Many come as warnings, heavy with dread. People often report that their most vivid premonitions concern tragedies rather than joys, an accident, a death, a disaster. It is as if the future announces itself most strongly when danger is near, when lives may change in an instant. These experiences can be deeply unsettling. A person wakes from a dream of fire, heart pounding, only to watch days later as flames consume a building. Another feels compelled to call a loved one, sensing something is wrong, and learns moments later of an emergency. Such moments leave behind not only wonder, but also a lingering unease. If the future can be glimpsed, why does it so often show us sorrow? One answer may lie in biology. The human brain evolved to prioritize threats. Across millennia, survival depended on noticing danger before it struck, the rustle in the grass that meant predator, the shift in the wind that meant storm. Our nervous systems are tuned to respond strongly to negative stimuli, a phenomenon psychologists call the negativity bias. If precognition is an extension of perception, it makes sense that it would be sharper for threats than for opportunities. The future might whisper many things, but our minds are most likely to hear the warnings. Dreams of joy may fade unnoticed, but dreams of loss burn themselves into memory. There are countless historical anecdotes of such ominous foresight. Before the sinking of the Titanic, reports circulated of passengers who cancelled their tickets after troubling dreams. Families spoke of loved ones who hesitated at the last moment, saved by a feeling they could not explain. During wartime, soldiers told of sudden certainty that they would not survive the next day, a certainty that too often proved true. In 9/11 survivor accounts, some people described strange delays and impulses that kept them away from the towers that morning. Skeptics explain these as coincidence magnified by hindsight, yet the sheer number of stories is difficult to ignore. It seems that in moments of great upheaval, human consciousness sometimes trembles before the shock arrives. But there is another, more subtle layer to these experiences. For many who receive dark premonitions, the question arises, could I have acted differently? Could I have prevented what I foresaw? Some carry guilt, believing they failed to act on a warning that might have saved lives. Others feel powerless, haunted by visions that came true despite their efforts. This dilemma reveals the central paradox of precognition. It suggests knowledge of the future, but it does not always grant the power to change it. Perhaps some futures are fixed, bound by forces too large for individuals to alter. Perhaps others are flexible, and foresight is precisely the gift that allows us to avoid them. The difficulty is that we never know which is which until afterward. Philosophers call this the problem of fatalism. If a vision comes true no matter what we do, then the future must be predetermined. But if acting on a vision can change the outcome, then the future is open, and the vision itself becomes part of the chain of events. In this way, precognition is not simply about foreknowledge but about participation. To dream of disaster may be to enter into a dialogue with time, where your response helps shape which version of events becomes real. Sometimes the warning comes too late, but sometimes it arrives in time to save. Many people describe narrow escapes that they attribute to acting on intuition, a delayed trip, a cancelled meeting, a sudden hesitation that spared them from harm. In these moments, precognition feels not like a curse, but like a hidden form of protection. Still, the darker side cannot be denied. Premonitions of tragedy weigh heavily on those who receive them. Some people report being plagued by recurring visions, unable to sleep, fearful of what they might mean. Others feel isolated, unwilling to share for fear of ridicule. The burden of foresight is not easily carried. Literature and myth capture this poignantly. Cassandra of Troy, cursed to see the future but never to be believed. Prophets who warned kings of disaster only to be ignored. These stories reflect the human struggle with foresight, its power, its ambiguity, and its pain. Modern psychology suggests ways to ease this burden. Sharing experiences in safe communities can reduce the sense of isolation. Keeping records helps distinguish genuine foresight from ordinary anxiety, separating rare, accurate premonitions from the noise of daily worry. Recognizing that not every dream is prophetic allows space for discernment, and cultivating practices of calm, meditation, prayer, reflection can transform precognition from a source of fear into a tool of guidance. For ultimately, the gift is not in predicting disaster, but in preparing the heart, reminding us that life is fragile, and that attention to the present matters more than control of the future. It is also worth remembering that not all precognitions are dark. Though warnings may be louder, many people describe visions of beauty, joy, or reunion. A mother dreams of the birth of her child before conceiving. A traveller sees a landscape in sleep and later stands within it. An artist envisions a work completed long before it exists. These moments remind us that the future is not only tragedy waiting to strike, but also wonder waiting to unfold. If foresight leans toward warning, it may be because survival demanded it. But beneath the warnings lies another current, the invitation to hope. Perhaps the deepest lesson of ominous premonitions is humility. They remind us that we are not masters of time, that much lies beyond our control. They also remind us that we are connected, woven into a fabric where threads stretch ahead and behind, touching us with echoes of what has not yet happened. To feel a warning is to be reminded of responsibility, not always to prevent disaster, but to live with awareness, to cherish the fragile present. For every vision of tragedy that proves true, there are countless ordinary moments of safety, love, and joy that pass unnoticed. Precognition, dark as it sometimes feels, can sharpen our gratitude for these. As you let these thoughts settle tonight, picture yourself standing in a field at dusk. The horizon glows faintly, but you cannot see what lies beyond it. Now imagine that on the wind comes a sound, distant thunder, or perhaps music. You cannot be certain which, but you know that something approaches. That is the essence of foresight. Not clarity, but awareness. Not certainty, but preparation. And whether it brings storm or song, the knowledge that the future already whispers in the present invites us to live more gently, to listen more carefully, and to honour the mystery that time lays before us. When people speak of precognition, they often imagine extraordinary events, visions of disasters, prophetic dreams, warnings of tragedy. Yet just as revealing are the subtle, everyday ways in which the future seems to brush against the present. These are not the grand prophecies that shape history, but the quiet moments that shape a life, the feeling to take a different road home, the sudden urge to call a friend at just the right time, the intuition to pause before signing a contract. These moments may not make headlines, but for the individuals who live them, they carry weight. They show that precognition, if it exists, may not be rare or exotic, but woven into the very fabric of daily consciousness. Consider the phenomenon of déjà vu. Most of us have experienced it, stepping into a room or beginning a conversation and feeling, with startling clarity, that we have been here before. Neuroscience offers explanations involving memory glitches, a misfiring of the brain that confuses the present with the past. Yet some have wondered whether déjà vu is not only a memory of the past but also a memory of the future, a brief alignment where consciousness touches a moment before it unfolds, and when it arrives, it feels like recall. If this is true, then déjà vu may be a glimpse of precognition so common that nearly everyone experiences it, though few stop to consider its implications. Another subtle form appears in decision-making. Studies show that people sometimes choose correctly before they have enough information to justify the choice. Gamblers in experiments begin to pick the winning deck long before they can articulate why. Entrepreneurs speak of gut instincts that lead them to success. Even ordinary choices, what street to walk, when to pause, which job to accept, often carry a sense of inner guidance that only later reveals itself as wise. Science might frame this as unconscious pattern recognition, but the line between subtle perception and true foresight is thin. Perhaps the unconscious is not only reading the present, but also touching the future, giving us feelings we cannot explain but can follow. Precognition also seems to appear in moments of strong emotion, as if intensity sharpens the signal. Lovers describe sensing one another's needs before they are spoken. Parents feel their children's distress across distances. Friends know to call in moments of crisis. These connections are often explained as empathy or coincidence, but when examined closely, they sometimes carry the marks of timing too precise to ignore. If consciousness is entangled across time, then perhaps it is also entangled across relationships, allowing information to travel not only forward but outward, linking lives in mysterious ways. The ordinariness of these experiences may be their most important feature. They suggest that precognition is not a paranormal gift, but a natural aspect of consciousness, usually quiet, sometimes overlooked, but always present. Like a background hum, it waits beneath the noise of daily thought, offering hints and nudges. When we ignore it, life continues as usual. When we notice it, life feels strangely guided, as though an invisible hand were brushing the edges of our choices. Whether or not this hand belongs to fate, probability, or the architecture of time, the effect is the same. We feel accompanied by something larger than ourselves. Skeptics argue that such feelings are illusions, that people remember the hits and forget the misses. This is undoubtedly true in part. Many gut feelings prove wrong, many dreams fail to align with reality. But the same could be said of perception itself. Our senses often mislead us, mirages, optical illusions, false memories, and yet we do not dismiss sight or hearing as unreal. Instead, we learn to refine them, to separate noise from signal. Perhaps precognition requires the same, not blind belief, not outright rejection, but cultivation, practice, discernment. Some psychologists have suggested that cultivating attention to intuition can indeed improve decision-making. By keeping journals of dreams, hunches, and synchronicities, people begin to notice patterns. Over time, they learn which inner voices carry weight and which do not. This is not so different from how a musician trains the ear or a sailor learns to read the sea. The capacity may be universal, but skill requires practice. Precognition, then, might be less about having visions than about listening carefully to subtle signals already present. Technology adds another dimension to this possibility. Wearable devices can now measure heart rate, skin conductance, and brain activity in real time. Researchers have found that these signals sometimes shift seconds before unexpected events, even when no external cues are available. Imagine in the future devices that alert us when our bodies sense something unusual, amplifying the whispers of precognition into signals we can consciously act upon. Such technology could transform intuition from a private mystery into a measurable tool, though it would also raise profound ethical questions. If we can predict crises seconds before they occur, who controls that knowledge? How is it used? The promise of foresight is always accompanied by the risk of misuse. Beyond technology, there is another reason why ordinary precognition matters. It shapes how we understand ourselves. If consciousness can sense the future, even in small ways, then we are not simply products of the past, but participants in the unfolding of time. This changes the story of who we are. Instead of being trapped in a present shaped only by what has been, we become beings stretched across time, with roots in tomorrow as much as in yesterday. Every intuition becomes a reminder that we are larger than we imagine, connected not only to what is, but also to what will be. It also changes how we see responsibility. If foresight exists, then our choices carry a different weight. To ignore a warning is not the same as never having received it. To sense possibility is to be invited to shape it. This does not mean living in fear of every dream or intuition, but it does mean honouring them as part of our dialogue with life. Just as we listen to reason, to evidence, to memory, so too can we listen to intuition, not as infallible truth, but as one more voice in the chorus of decision-making. As you reflect tonight, think of your own subtle encounters with the future. A phone call placed at the perfect moment, a delay that saved you from harm, a dream that echoed later events. These moments may not prove anything to the world, but they prove something to you. They remind you that life is threaded with mystery, that consciousness may be more porous than we think, that time itself may not be a wall but a veil, thin enough to let through glimpses of what lies ahead. Picture yourself walking along a forest path at dusk. The trail curves ahead, hidden by trees. You cannot see what is around the bend, yet every so often you hear a sound or feel a shift in the air that tells you something approaches. A bird takes flight. A breeze carries a scent. Your skin tingles with alertness. None of these reveal the future fully, but together they prepare you. This is what everyday precognition feels like. Not a map, not a prophecy, but a quiet guidance, a sense that tomorrow is already brushing against today. To honour that sense is not to abandon reason, but to live with greater attention, humility, and wonder. The more we linger on the idea of precognition, the more it challenges not only science and philosophy, but also our sense of ethics. If the future can be glimpsed, even imperfectly, what responsibilities come with that knowledge? The question is not abstract. It has haunted humanity for millennia. Ancient prophets were often burdened with visions of calamity they could not prevent. Modern individuals who dream of disasters sometimes wonder whether to act, whether to warn others, or whether doing so would change the very outcome they foresaw. The dilemma is profound. To know the future, even dimly, is to be entangled with it. One aspect of this dilemma appears in the stories of those who dream of tragedy. A man wakes night after night from visions of a plane crash. He finally cancels his flight, and days later learns that the plane he would have boarded went down. For him, the premonition was salvation. But others dream of events they cannot avoid. An illness, a loved one's passing, a disaster far away. They are left with knowledge without power, insight without agency. The ethical weight is heavy, for it raises questions about fate and freedom. Did the dreamer glimpse a fixed event, or could action have changed the outcome? If so, does failing to act make them responsible? History is filled with tales of visionaries who face such burdens. The Oracle of Delphi, though revered, often spoke in riddles that placed the weight of interpretation on others. Cassandra of Troy, cursed to see but never be believed, embodies the pain of foresight without influence. Medieval seers who warned of plague or famine were sometimes dismissed or persecuted, their visions twisted by politics and fear. Even in modern times, those who report premonitions are often met with skepticism, accused of fraud or delusion. The result is that many remain silent, bearing their foresight alone. This silence too is an ethical choice, shaped by the tension between ridicule and responsibility. Ethics also enters through the possibility of misuse. If precognition is real, it can be exploited. Leaders might claim prophetic powers to control followers. Institutions might attempt to harness foresight for political or economic gain. Imagine a world where companies use subtle physiological signals to predict consumer behavior seconds before choices are made, or governments monitor dreams for hints of unrest. What begins as curiosity could become surveillance, and what begins as guidance could become manipulation. The line between wisdom and control is thin, and history shows that knowledge of the future has always been tempting to those in power. Yet there is another, gentler side to this ethical landscape. For many, glimpses of the future inspire compassion rather than control. Knowing that life is fragile, that tomorrow is uncertain, deepens the value of the present. A mother who dreams of her child in danger may become more attentive. A community that shares visions of disaster may prepare more carefully, saving lives. An artist who senses the shape of cultural change may create works that speak to needs not yet visible, guiding society with foresight. In these cases, precognition becomes not a weapon but a gift, one that encourages responsibility, care, and humility. To navigate this terrain, perhaps we need to rethink what it means to know the future. Too often, foresight is imagined as certainty, a fixed script written in advance. But precognition may be less about certainty and more about possibility, not a dictation, but an invitation. To glimpse one possible future is to be reminded that futures exist, plural, and that our actions shape which becomes real. The ethical responsibility, then, is not to declare inevitability but to respond with wisdom. A dream of disaster need not lead to despair. It can lead to preparation, resilience, or compassion. A vision of hope need not lead to passivity. It can inspire effort to bring it forth. In this way, precognition becomes a dialogue with time and ethics becomes the art of how we answer. Some philosophers suggest that living with foresight is similar to living with memory. Just as we are responsible for what we remember, how we use the lessons of the past, we may also be responsible for how we use hints of the future. Memory can bind us in regret or guide us with wisdom. Foresight can paralyze us with fear or empower us with awareness. Both are forms of knowledge, and both demand discernment. The challenge is to treat glimpses of tomorrow with the same respect we give to lessons of yesterday, neither dismissing them nor surrendering blindly, but listening, weighing, and choosing carefully. In practical terms, this means cultivating discernment. Not every dream is prophetic, not every intuition is correct, but some may carry truth, and learning to recognize them requires patience. Keeping records, reflecting on accuracy, and sharing experiences in supportive communities can help distinguish genuine signals from noise. By doing so, we build not only personal wisdom, but also collective responsibility. Imagine a society where people are encouraged to listen to their intuitions without stigma, where foresight is tested and respected but not exploited. Such a society might navigate uncertainty with greater resilience, less fear, and more compassion. The ethical question also extends to how we tell these stories. When people share their premonitions, do we dismiss them, exploit them, or honor them? Dismissal closes the door, exploitation distorts the truth, but honor allows dialogue. It does not mean believing every claim, but it does mean listening with respect, allowing mystery to breathe. For in the end, the way we treat those who glimpse the future reflects the way we treat mystery itself. Do we fear it? Do we seek to control it? Or do we allow it to remind us of our limits, our responsibilities, and our wonder? As you let these thoughts drift tonight, imagine standing with a lantern at the edge of a dark path. The light reaches only a few steps ahead, but every so often you sense something further, a sound, a shadow, a glimmer. You do not know for certain what lies beyond, but the faint awareness changes how you walk. You tread more carefully or more boldly, or with greater gratitude. This is the ethical heart of precognition. It is not about control or certainty. It is about how we choose to walk when the future whispers. And in that choice lies not only responsibility but also meaning. As we near the end of this exploration, it is worth stepping back to ask why the idea of precognition fascinates us so deeply. Even for those who doubt its reality, the thought that tomorrow might already be whispering in today stirs something in the imagination. It speaks to our longing for certainty in an uncertain world, to our desire to find meaning in the chaos of events, to our hope that we are not merely drifting through time, but somehow connected to it. The fascination is not new. It runs like a thread through human history across cultures, religions, and philosophies. To understand it is to understand something profound about the human condition. One reason precognition captivates us is that it touches on mortality. We know, with a certainty that no foresight is required, that our lives will end. This knowledge makes the future both frightening and compelling. Dreams of death, intuitions of illness, or visions of ending strike us with particular force because they echo the deepest truth of our existence. Time is limited. When people report precognitions of death, whether accurate or not, they are often transformed by them, reminded of life's fragility. In this sense, foresight becomes not only a question of mystery, but a mirror of our mortality. It reminds us that the future matters precisely because it is finite. Another reason is that precognition suggests connection. If the future can be sensed, then time is not a wall but a web, and we are part of it. This dissolves the feeling of isolation that so often haunts modern life. We are not sealed inside the present moment, cut off from what is to come. We are woven into a larger fabric, our consciousness stretched across past, present, and future. The intuition that warns us, the dream that guides us, the synchronicity that startles us, all point to a universe more connected than it appears. Whether one interprets this connection as divine, quantum, or psychological, the effect is the same. We feel less alone. Precognition also fascinates because it offers hope. If we can sense danger before it arrives, then perhaps we can avoid it. If we can glimpse possibilities, then perhaps we can choose the better path. This hope has driven cultures to consult oracles, to record dreams, to conduct experiments, to tell stories of prophecy and fate. Even when visions fail, the very act of seeking them reflects a belief that the future is not beyond reach. It is a belief that life is not blind, that guidance is available, that we're not entirely powerless in the face of time. At the same time, the fascination reveals our ambivalence. For if the future is knowable, does that mean it is fixed? If visions are inevitable, then hope turns to fatalism. If they can be changed, then knowledge becomes responsibility. This tension between destiny and freedom, between fear and empowerment, gives precognition its emotional power. It is not simply a question of whether foresight is real, but of what it means for our lives if it is. The fascination is therefore not only intellectual but existential. Stories capture this ambivalence vividly. In ancient myths, seers often face tragedy precisely because of their foresight. Oedipus, warned of his fate, tries to avoid it, only to fulfill it. Cassandra sees disaster but cannot prevent it. These tales remind us of the paradox. To know the future may be as dangerous as to ignore it. Yet in other stories, foresight is salvation, the dream that warns a traveller, the intuition that saves a life. Between these poles lies the tension that keeps us captivated. Modern culture reflects the same themes. Films, novels, and television shows return again and again to the idea of seeing the future. Some portray it as a gift, others as a curse, but always as a force that changes the way characters live. Audiences respond because the theme resonates with their own experiences. Even if we have never had a vivid premonition, we know what it is to feel intuition, to sense patterns, to long for guidance. Popular culture amplifies these feelings, turning private mysteries into public stories. The fascination continues because it reflects something real in the human psyche. Perhaps the deepest reason for our fascination is that precognition suggests that time itself is not what it seems. If glimpses of the future are possible, then our linear sense of past, present and future is incomplete. And if that is true, then the universe is stranger and more wondrous than we allow ourselves to believe. This wonder is both thrilling and unsettling. It destabilizes our assumptions, but it also expands our horizons. It invites us to imagine ourselves not as small creatures trapped in the present, but as participants in a larger, more mysterious unfolding. It transforms time from a prison into a mystery. This transformation is not merely theoretical, it shapes how we live. People who believe they have glimpsed the future often describe a shift in perspective. They become more attentive to dreams, more trusting of intuition, more aware of synchronicity. They also become more humble, aware that life is not fully under control. For some, this brings fear. For others, peace. Either way, the experience changes them. They begin to live as if the future is not entirely unknown, as if they are walking not in darkness but in twilight, where faint outlines of what is coming can be seen. The fascination with precognition, then, is ultimately a fascination with meaning. To glimpse the future is to feel that life is not random, that events are connected, that our stories matter. Even skeptics, who explain premonitions as coincidence or bias, are compelled by the stories because they touch on the same longing for meaning. Whether or not precognition is real in a scientific sense, it is real in a psychological sense, shaping how people interpret their lives. And perhaps that is its greatest power, not to predict events with certainty, but to remind us that life is meaningful, that our choices matter, that time is not empty but full of possibilities. As you drift deeper into thought tonight, consider your own fascination. When you hear stories of dreams that come true, do you feel fear, doubt, wonder, or hope? Each response reveals something about your relationship with time, with mortality, with meaning. To reflect on precognition is to reflect on what it means to be human. Creatures who remember the past, imagine the future, and sometimes perhaps glimpse it. Whether real or not, the fascination itself is a mirror, showing us our longing to belong to something larger than the present moment. So imagine yourself standing at the edge of a great ocean of time. Waves from the past wash at your feet, and waves from the future lap gently against the shore. You cannot see across the water, but you can feel its presence, hear its whispers, sense its vastness. This is the mystery that fascinates us, that we are not separate from this ocean, but immersed in it, carried by it, connected to it. And whether or not we can truly see what lies ahead, the wonder is that we sense it at all. As we reach the end of this journey into the mystery of precognition, it is fitting to step back and reflect on the path we have travelled. We began with the simple observation that human beings sometimes feel they know things before they happen, through dreams, intuitions, or coincidences. We followed this thread across cultures and centuries, through temples and laboratories, through stories of oracles and experiments with random number generators. We considered how precognition appears in art, science, spirituality, and daily life. Along the way, we encountered paradoxes, the future as both open and closed, foresight as both blessing and burden, knowledge as both gift and responsibility. And now, as we look back, what remains is not certainty but wonder. Perhaps that is the true destination of this exploration, not proof, but perspective. To ask about precognition is to ask about time itself, and time remains one of the greatest mysteries of existence. Physics tells us that the past, present, and future may all coexist in a single fabric of space-time. Psychology tells us that the brain is a prediction machine, forever leaning into what comes next. Spiritual traditions tell us that consciousness can step outside the flow of time, glimpsing futures as easily as memories. None of these views is complete on its own, but together they point toward a reality more flexible and expansive than our daily experience suggests. Precognition, in this light, is not an anomaly, but a window, a crack in the wall of ordinary perception through which a larger truth shines. And what of us, the ones who peer through that window? We are creatures stretched across time, remembering backward and perhaps remembering forward. We are shaped by what has been, yet drawn toward what will be. In our dreams and intuitions, in our art and science, we sometimes touch the edges of tomorrow. Most of the time, the signals are faint, easy to miss. But when they come, they remind us that we are not prisoners of the present moment. We are participants in the unfolding of time, part of a dialogue between what is and what will be. This perspective carries both humility and empowerment. Humility, because it reminds us that much lies beyond our control, that time is vast and mysterious, and that our glimpses are partial at best. Empowerment, because it suggests that our choices matter, that foresight is not given to paralyze us but to guide us. A warning dream invites caution, a hopeful vision inspires action, an intuition nudges us toward connection. Each glimpse, whether of danger or possibility, is a reminder that the future is not indifferent. It is already reaching toward us, and we, in turn, are reaching toward it. In this sense, precognition is less about prediction and more about relationship. It is not a fortune-teller's script, but a conversation between consciousness and time. Sometimes the conversation is clear, sometimes it is muddled, but always it invites listening. To cultivate this listening is to live with greater attention, to notice dreams, to honor intuitions, to reflect on synchronicities. It is to approach life not as a random sequence of events, but as a meaningful unfolding, full of hints and whispers. Whether or not every whisper proves true, the act of listening itself enriches our lives, making us more aware, more compassionate, more attuned to mystery. There is also comfort here. For if time is not a rigid arrow but a living fabric, then perhaps separation is not as absolute as it seems. Perhaps loved ones are not lost to us completely, but exist still in the patterns of time, accessible in dreams or intuitions. Perhaps our choices ripple not only forward but backward, shaping not just what will be, but how we understand what has been. Perhaps consciousness is larger than the span of a single life, stretching beyond the boundaries we imagine. Precognition, then, becomes not only about knowing the future but about belonging to eternity. Yet even as we allow ourselves to dream of such possibilities, we must remain grounded. The mystery of precognition is not solved, and perhaps it never will be. But that need not be discouraging. Mystery is not the enemy of understanding. It is its companion. To live without mystery would be to live without depth, without wonder, without the sense that life is more than what meets the eye. Precognition reminds us that mystery is alive, woven into our very perception. It invites us not to master time, but to walk with it, humbly, attentively, with awe. So tonight, as you rest, let these reflections settle gently. Think of the times in your own life when the future seemed to brush against the present. A dream that echoed reality, an intuition that guided you, a coincidence too perfect to ignore. Whether you interpret them as prophecy, psychology, or chance, they belong to the story of your life, a story woven with mystery. To honor them is not to abandon reason, but to embrace the fullness of what it means to be human, a being who wonders, who listens, who imagines, who sometimes glimpses tomorrow. Picture yourself once more at the edge of the great ocean of time. Behind you, waves of memory crash and fade. Before you, waves of possibility rise and shimmer. You cannot see across the water, but you can feel its presence, vast and eternal. Now imagine that on the breeze comes a whisper, faint, uncertain, but unmistakable. It is the voice of tomorrow, calling softly, reminding you that you are already part of it. You breathe deeply, you listen, and you step forward, not with fear, but with wonder. For the future is not only waiting, it is already here, woven into your dreams, your intuitions, your choices. And as you walk toward it, you're reminded of the truth that has guided this entire journey. That consciousness and time are partners in mystery, and that to be alive is to stand forever at their meeting point, listening for the whispers of what is yet to come.